prioritize recovery efforts, and we know that this will be a long road, at a minimum a couple of months away from having a final comprehensive picture of damage done, completed cost estimates, and a prioritized path forward identified. In the meantime, as you know, we have a crew of folks who like to get things done and done now. So where we have been able to reopen roads and accesses, regrade parking lots, we have done so. Also, a quick update on our strategic planning effort. As you know, we have a very robust time frame. It will take us through FY19 to fully implement all of the changes that we are working on now. But we do have a significant milestone in August of this year to have our revised strategic plan developed enough to reframe our FY19 budget template so that it is reflective of our strategic planning efforts. So by August, we also hope to have a dashboard introduced so that the Commission and administration can more closely monitor how we are advancing the implementation of our strategic planning efforts. Division chiefs over a series of several meetings will continue to identify strategic outcomes to accomplish our 4 department goals, which again are sustain and improve fish, forest, and wildlife resources, enhance the relevance of conservation, connect citizens with forest, fish, and wildlife resources, and strengthen operational excellence and provide us superior customer service. So in the coming weeks, outcome champions will be identified, and these champions, their jobs will be to gather interdivisional teams responsible for developing key strategic and priority activities and measures. We'll also continue to evaluate department activities based upon such factors as the return on investment. Are these activities duplicative of other areas of the agency or externally? Are they considered an essential service or function of government? Can they better meet the needs of citizens we serve? And can we make these activities more effective and efficient in delivering services? So to lead these last criteria of effective and efficient delivery of products and services, I'm delighted to announce to the Commission to introduce Todd Samsel, who will be leading the process improvement and lean effort for this agency. Todd started this week as assistant to the Director for Operational Excellence, and he comes with strong experience both in the conservation arena and in implementing lean in a government agency. And I know he'll hit the ground running. Todd, would you raise your hand? We'll be engaging all department staff in a survey to ensure we're including their input, as well as engaging the citizenry through a variety of means, including our 80th anniversary open houses. We'll continue to keep the Commission engaged and updated on these strategic planning efforts, and we appreciate your support. So finally, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, on the resource front, and a little happy news, we've begun our black bear collaring efforts for the summer, and just this week, the very first elk calf of the year was collared. So, with that good news, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I turn it back to you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the Director? All right, let's get on with our business of the day. And Larry Evans, may I call you to the podium?
If you need Harry.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Sorry. Just read the agenda.
I'm a little shorter. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Dr. Pauly, Ms. Maples. Protection Division would like to recognize Lincoln County Conservation Agent Kevin Eulinger for being selected as a 2017 Lee Gladfelter Memorial Award recipient. Kevin, please stand. Agent Eulinger was officially honored at the Pope and Young National Convention Awards Banquet hosted in St. Louis in early April. The Lee Gladfelter Award recognized a wildlife professional who, through their efforts, has made a significant contribution to bow hunting and wildlife conservation. Agent Eulinger has been assigned to Lincoln County for the past 10 years. He is an important member of the Missouri Department of Conservation and an asset to his community. Agent Eulinger has routinely led the St. Louis region in arrest and youth programs for many of his 10 years. Throughout his career, he's been involved in several high-profile poaching cases that involved apprehending some major wildlife violators not only in Missouri, but also in the neighboring state of Illinois. Agent Eulinger brings the same enthusiasm and dedication that he demonstrates in his law enforcement efforts to successfully promoting and implementing programs and projects. He often works with local school groups, civic organizations, and a variety of other diverse groups to spread the conservation message. Each year he puts in numerous hours working with youth in schools, presenting archery programs, and youth hunting clinics for the youngsters. Working his 11th year as a conservation agent in Lincoln County, Agent Kevin Eulinger continues to be one of the most dedicated hardworking conservation agents in the state. He's always willing to go the extra mile for his fellow agents, the general public, and other department personnel. It is with great pleasure to congratulate Conservation Agent Kevin Muhlenberg as a 2017 Lee Gladfelder Memorial Award recipient. And Kevin was also named as our Protection Division Conservation Agent of the Year this year.
Mr. Chair, please. I live on land in Lincoln County and Pike County. I live in St. Louis, and I just want to add my own personal comment about Kevin. I mean, the integrity and the class and the decorum with which our team conducts themselves is just something special. You know, I get a call twice a month, 3 times a month about a contact. You know, last week it was the job that Mike Christensen did over at Malamar, private hunt club, bunch of rich guys. You know, Mike handled himself like a pro. Chris Morrow back there, and working in that environment. I mean, it's tough anywhere, but there's a lot of egos and a lot of private landowners and a lot of people to deal with in the region that these guys work, and they just hold themselves above the fray. And Kevin, he just enjoys an incredible reputation among the landowners around us, and just as a personal note, I wanted to say thank you.
Any other comments? Congratulations, Agent. We appreciate your service very much. Okay, next item on the list here is consideration of the items on the consent agenda. Let me read through those quickly, and then we'll see if there are any that we wish to have pulled for discussion. First, there's the minutes of the March 21, 22 open meeting at Montauk State Park. Also, the minutes of the April 6 and 7 commission meeting, open meeting. Major discussions, major construction project status report, information technology project status report, an action item to revoke hunting and fishing and trapping privileges for individuals for cause, and for those not in compliance with child support laws, and for those in accordance with the terms of the Interstate Wildlife Violator Compact. Are there any that any commissioner would like to see pulled off the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to remove the action item on minutes of March 21st, 22nd. For the
Okay.
discussion.
Let's move that to the end of our agenda today. And do I have a motion to approve the remaining items that are on the list?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right, any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, let's go on to regulations. Tom?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Director Pauly. The next series of comments will address the Regulations Committee that met on April 12, 2017, and will be considering recommendations related to the 2017-2018 fall deer hunting season. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, before I begin my formal report addressing that topic, recall earlier this year the Commission voted to approve a series of recommendations for regulation changes identified during the annual review of the Wildlife Code. Following that initial vote, all proposed amendments were filed with the Secretary of State's office for publication in the Missouri Register, which initiated a formal 30-day public comment period on those proposals. As previously instructed, for those amendments that did not receive comments, no further action is required, and staff will file the final orders of rulemaking with the Secretary of State. However, the department received input on one of those proposed changes during the comment period, which ran from April 4th through May 3rd of this year. A summary of the input received along with a formal response from staff is included in the final order of rulemaking, which is provided on the 5th page of your commission packet. This presentation of an order of rulemaking as a formal commission action signifies the final step in the department's regulations process. The The commission, as you recall, has the authority to adopt as originally written, amend, or withdraw the proposed regulation change. If approved today, this order rulemaking would be filed with the Secretary of State's office with an anticipated effective date of August 30th, 2017. Mr. Chairman and Commission, included in your packet is an order of rulemaking for 3 CSR 10-12.110, use of boats and motors. Given that there was no new information received, I request Commission approval of this final order of rulemaking with no changes to the original recommendation.
Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. As you recall, Commissioners, in December of 2016, the Commission voted to set dates for each portion of the 2017-2018 deer season. We do that so people can schedule it ahead to participate in our deer season. Today, I will ask the Commission consideration of a series of action items that will adjust regulations pertaining to the harvest of antlered deer by youth, allow the department to more effectively manage chronic wasting disease and establish management zones, identify specific counties where mandatory chronic wasting disease sample collection will occur, set deer and turkey hunting regulations on conservation areas, and establish managed hunts for the 2017-2018 season. We'll also consider removal of concealed carry permit requirements during the fall deer and spring turkey seasons, and modify rules regarding labeling to accommodate hunters with electronic permits. Mr. Chairman, before I move forward with these action items, I would like to introduce a few staff here that will provide greater detail on the deliberations at hand. First of all, I'd like to introduce Wildlife Health Specialist Jasmine Batten and Mandatory Sampling Incident Commander Danny Hartwig, who will provide an overview of chronic wasting disease management activities. Following Danny's and Jasmine's presentation, Resource Scientist Barbara Keller will provide the details of the 2017-18 deer season recommendations, and then we'll proceed with the formal presentation of formal action items. With that, Jasmine, Danny, welcome. We'll move on.
Good morning, Jasmine. Danny, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Murphy, Dr. Polly. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of the 2016-2017 chronic wasting disease surveillance efforts. I'll present the results, discuss what those mean, and outline what our next steps will be. So as we get going here, I realize this is not a new issue to the state of Missouri. You all are familiar with the disease to some level, but I think it's important to take a step back and really remind ourselves why we care so much about this issue. Chronic wasting disease is a fatal and infectious disease that affects members of the deer family. It's consistently lethal. There is no known vaccine, cure, or treatment. It's spread in a variety of ways, both through direct deer-to-deer contact and through contact with a contaminated environment when an affected deer is shedding the disease into the environment. There's a lot we don't know about chronic wasting disease, but one thing that we have seen is a consistent, predictable pattern of spread in a deer population. Once it becomes established, it does grow in both prevalence and distribution. There is no evidence at this point in time to suggest that transmission rate either slows or reaches a peak or simply burns itself out. And so what we're left with is a disease that, without significant intervention, continues to spread over time and kills deer. And so what we're really worried about is this potential for long-term significant population declines. And we can look at the state of Wyoming for kind of a solid example of a place where the disease is actually declining deer populations. In the southeast part of Wyoming, where the disease has been for a very long time, 50 years or greater, recent research has seen a 19% annual decrease in mule deer populations in that endemic area. In their white-tailed deer population in that area, they're seeing 10% annual declines. And so researchers think that without major changes in harvest regulations or such, that those populations could become extinct in 40 to 50 years. So we're seeing some real effects out there on the landscape. Now, I realize that Wyoming is not Missouri, and we're very different in geography and habitat, so I think if we keep a close eye on the state of Wisconsin, we might get an indication of what the potential for this disease to impact our herd will be. And Wisconsin's been monitoring chronic wasting disease since 2002, and they've seen in the southwest part of their state the prevalence in adult males grow from 8 to 10% to over 30%, and in some local areas the prevalence in adult males is even greater than 50%. And I think what's interesting right now is their Department of Natural Resources has initiated a 5-year study to track deer survival in that affected area. So I think it's important to keep an eye on that state to see what's going to happen to their deer populations in the area. So with that, we'll move forward to the 2016-2017 surveillance effort. I have for you a graph depicting the number of deer tested in Missouri since we first began testing sick deer in 2001. The biggest take-home message from this graph is you can see the sample size in this last year dramatically increased. We accomplished an approximately 3.5-fold increase in the number of deer tested in the 2016-2017 surveillance season. Now that increased effort dramatically increases our confidence in the understanding of the disease in the landscape, but it also had a secondary benefit of allowing us to increase the number of hunters that we are outreaching and educating on this disease. At the same time, we enlisted nearly every member of our staff to accomplish this feat, so we also trained and educated pretty much our entire department about this serious threat, and so we have really informed employees now to better serve our constituents on this issue. So now I'm going to walk through what our surveillance effort really looks like. Overall, we tested over 25,500 deer this year, and the majority of those samples came from our 29-county chronic wasting disease management zone. Just as a reminder, the management zone includes counties within about 25 miles of previous CWD detections. Now, most of those samples in the management zone did come from our mandatory sampling efforts opening weekend. That was our new regulation change. And we sampled over 19,200 deer in just 2 days. So that was an incredible feat, and it was incredibly successful in terms of execution. We did continue sampling throughout the entirety of the seasons in those counties in a number of ways. We had 45 cooperating taxidermists collecting samples on our behalf. We also had staff in locations in those counties collecting in a variety of other ways, including sampling roadkill deer in priority areas, sampling sick deer. And then I wanted to point out that we also had about 750 samples that were collected in post-winter season operations. So after the close of the season, staff worked very closely with landowners in those key priority areas very near where the disease has been found before, so 1 to 5 miles from previous detections. And I mention this effort because 750 samples is a very small percentile of our overall sample size, but they're incredibly important samples because they're coming from areas very near where the disease has been detected. One other thing to point out is our mandatory sampling effort that increased our overall sample size in the management zone also was effective in increasing the sample size in these key priority areas. So that allowed us to lessen the burden of removing additional deer outside of season for CWD sampling. In some of those areas, at least greater than 50% of our samples came from mandatory sampling. So that was that many fewer deer that needed to be removed post-season. I'd also like to point out that we did have routine statewide surveillance continuing. A lot of times this sampling effort kind of gets overlooked because there's such a focus on the management zone. But we have been continuing to test deer throughout the state since 2002. We had 2,100 samples collected outside of the CWD management zone. The way that we accomplished this is primarily working through cooperating taxidermists. So we had an additional 25 taxidermists in these counties. This is really important surveillance for detecting the disease in new areas of the state. It's also an efficient method for sampling as it doesn't involve that many staff since the taxidermists are collecting samples. And it also has the benefit that we're targeting adult males, which have the highest prevalence of the disease, so it's efficient for surveillance purposes. Finally, I'd like to point out that we had surveillance also going on in the southwest portion of the state in 7 key counties. This surveillance was initiated due to the detection of chronic wasting disease in Northwest Arkansas for the first time in February of 2016. So what we did is increase surveillance as much as we could given the mandatory sampling up north that we were already committed to. But we recruited 10 taxidermists in those 7 counties that collected samples throughout the entirety of the deer seasons. We also had 10 MDC stations at meat processors opening weekend where they collected voluntary samples from hunters. So this was not part of the mandatory sampling effort. And staff in those counties have been diligent over the last year in doing roadkill surveillance and looking out for sick deer. So that's what the surveillance effort looks like. I'll just walk us through the results. So again, we tested over 25,500 deer this year, and we had nine positives. And I have a chart up there that shows the number of positives by county this year, and then the overall number for each of those counties. We'll walk through each of these detections a bit, and I'll just point out the most notable items. So we did have 2 positives in Macon County.
I'm sorry to interrupt, just want to clarify, those are the ones that we've tested, that does not include the one from inside the high fence.
Yeah, these are just our positives on the total chart, yes, those are just our free-ranging positives, yeah.
We have that number for the total, when you include the high fence positives.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
We've had fatalities and we've had positives from within the high
Right.
fence, and this is just from the free range.
Yes.
We have the data or number, just by comparison, how many?
Yeah. So in the Lynn County facility, there was just 1 positive, and I believe the Macon County had 10.
That's this year.
No, just, there haven't been any more
Okay.
positives there, so that was, in 2010, there was the Lynn County positive.
Thank you. That's what I was.
Okay, thank
Sorry
you.
to interrupt.
No worries, that's just fine, so we had 9 CWD positive free-ranging deer this year. 3 of those came from northeast Wisconsin, sorry, northeast Missouri.
I thought that was a long
from-
migration.
Disclosure, I'm from Wisconsin, but I love Missouri. So. All right, get back on track here. So 3 positives up in northeast Missouri. These positives really were not a surprise to us. They came from within our CWD core areas or very near. So our core areas are those locations in the state where we've had multiple positives in our free-ranging herd clustered in tight distribution. So we know that the disease is established there. Something to point out that was really good news for this year, in those 13 counties up north, we tested about 8,800 deer, and we didn't find any new areas of infection. So that's huge news. Part of this mandatory sampling purpose was to detect the disease in new areas as early as possible so that we could get in there and do something about it. And so that's really good news that out of all that sampling, our only positives were exactly where we found positives before.
So there were no new positives in eastern Adair County where we found 1, I think, a couple of years ago, right?
Well, we have the one positive in Adair. We have an established core area in that area where we did. So in 2014, I believe it was, we had 1 positive. We've continued to find positives there over the years.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So moving to eastern Missouri, last year, just to remind you, we had our first positive in northeast Franklin County. This year we did unfortunately find 2 additional positives in that area. So what this signifies to us is that the disease is established in the population in northeast Franklin County. So we've now designated that as a 3rd core area. So we have 3 areas of the state where we know that local transmission of the disease is happening. Through mandatory sampling, we did find 2 additional areas of infection. We had single positives in southwest Franklin County, and we had a single positive in southeast Jefferson County. While it's not good news to find new areas of infection, the take-home message here is that we sampled over 6,600 deer in those counties in that area, and we only had single positives there. So that tells us that the disease is not widely distributed based on how many deer we tested. It's not widespread there. Perhaps the most surprising results through our statewide sampling, we did have a totally new area of infection in St. Clair County. This was our first detection in the western part of our state. It was 2 adult males located very close to each other. So what we know at this point in time, with 2 positives close together. The disease does look to be at least somewhat established in that area. In other words, there must be local transmission happening. But we really can't say much about the extent of it to this point because that statewide surveillance happens at a lower intensity level. So going forward, as we'll talk about in a minute here, we're going to really focus on increasing surveillance in that area. Another good news to point out is in the central part of our state, in those management counties, we did not have any positives. Just to remind you, we've had one single positive in Cole County back in March of 2015. Through this continued increased surveillance, mandatory sampling last year, we haven't had any additional positives. That doesn't necessarily mean that the disease is not there, but what it does tell us is that if it's out there, it's at a very low occurrence based on the high number of deer that we tested and not finding any positives. And then finally down in southwest Missouri, out of those about 1,000 deer that we tested, we did not have any detections. That's good news. It's kind of a bit of a smaller sample size. So again, it doesn't mean to us that the disease isn't out there, but it's a pretty confident indication that it's not widely spread and not at a really high occurrence level. Overall, this is the total number of free-ranging positives that we've had since 2012 and the geographic location that they occurred in. Since 2002, we have sampled over 76,000 deer, and the number of positives that we've had in our free-ranging herd is 42. So what that indicates to us is the disease, despite finding in its new locations, does seem to be relatively rare in our state. Through this mandatory sampling effort, if the disease was out there in those counties at a wide distribution, high prevalence, we would have found it. I know that sometimes the public or even our staff question if the disease has always been there, could it be everywhere, we just haven't looked for it. Sampling for this many years and at this great level, I think does really give us confidence that it is a relatively new infection in our state, based on how we've seen the disease spread in other areas. So just to point out, this isn't the prettiest of maps, but it was shared by the Arkansas Fish and Game Commission with us. This is their most up-to-date chronic wasting disease surveillance map. What you'll see is the bold line up there is our state border. All the little red dots are the positives that they've had to date, and the green dots are the negatives that they've tested. So I think just looking at the map, you can see that the situation in Arkansas is not good. They've had over 200 positives. Most of them come in their white-tailed deer, but they have had a few elk. Most of the positives are in Newton County, but there are several positives that are within 10 miles of our border. So we see this as a real threat to our deer herd in the southern part of the state. We are in close contact with their fish and game officials. We share information with them. We even have our staff, the meat processors down in southwest Missouri, and a few of our taxidermists collect some Arkansas samples for them and send them back for testing. So that's what our surveillance efforts and results looked like for this last year. So now I'd like to briefly outline what does it mean, what's our next steps. We've proposed expanding the management zone from 29 counties to 41 counties. This is to maintain a 25-mile buffer around the detections in St. Clair and Jefferson counties. And then additionally, we've proposed to add the counties in southwest Missouri that are within 25 miles of CWD positives in Arkansas. And again, some of those positives actually are much closer than 25 miles, within 10 miles. In terms of our sampling strategy for next year, we have put forth a regulation change to allow our mandatory sampling to occur in designated counties rather than requiring every county in a management zone to be sampled. All of the new counties in the management zone will be subject to other regulation changes, which Dr. Keller will outline in just a bit here. But in terms of sampling, what we've done is prioritize greatest sampling need for next year. So we propose sampling in 25 counties, which includes new management zone counties, counties with previous positives, or counties that are very near previous positives. So again, that's mandatory sampling in 25 counties. Additionally, we'll have taxidermists in all those counties collecting samples, and we'll continue with our routine statewide surveillance and surveillance of sick and roadkill deer. So with that, that's where we're going for next year, and I will turn it over to Mr. Hartwig to talk specifically about our mandatory sampling efforts.
Should we perhaps entertain a few questions at this point? There might be something to, any questions, commissioners? Comment?
I've got some suggestions that would be for later, just for communication. There's so much great information that you provided.
Want to hold it for a while?
But yeah, but I do have one specific question, and that is,
I've got a couple minutes left.
do you have any maps or visuals that show these management zones, these hot areas, if you will, and any high fence operations or proximity to any of those as more areas we have, concentrations?
We do, we have, so through our protection works with one of our GIS specialists to keep as up to date of a map as they can of the permitted facilities. So we do have that information available. And we can
I'd like to
provide
see
that
that
to you.
if I could.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, obviously don't have it today, but we can get that for you.
I would just say I'd like the copies, that's good
Do
information.
you have a question? Yes, sir. Please.
In the follow-up to Commissioner Blair, by the way, very good presentation, appreciate it. And I know a lot of work went into that, but, how many samples did we do out of the high-fenced areas? And did we find,
This year,
yes,
so we're not engaged as an agency in sampling those animals, so we haven't, and in rare occasions, if protection works with a producer that is not in a federal herd management plan and is agreeable to submitting some heads for testing, that does happen on occasion, so there's a small number of captive deer that have come to us for testing. When I say small number, it's probably not even a dozen. But so most of that testing that happens in those fenced areas does not happen with our agency. That's would be Department of Agriculture or USDA.
am I understanding you correctly, that we do not or cannot require testing of animals from the high-fenced area?
Right now, that's correct. And we have
I'm
the,
sorry, what is correct?
that's correct, but we can't, at this point in time, require that. Any of the testing requirements that came through our regulation changes are held up in that lawsuit right now. So we don't have any authority for testing of those captive deer at this point in time.
So we can require testing in these management zones, but we cannot require, I want to be clear on this, we cannot require testing from the high fenced areas, which is where we think, and know as a fact, up in the Lynn, Macon County areas, where this stuff started.
That's correct, Commissioner. That's the reason for the regulation changes that are on the table that are now engaged in court, is that to require all mortality in captive facilities to be tested. And that is the regulation that's in court.
And we have, none of these operators are willing to let us test.
No, they've not come to us and volunteered to test. We have no leverage to force that.
So in other words, no cooperative effort on their parts.
What we do is we do work with Dr. Hickman at the Department of Agriculture on occasion.
Yes, thank you.
I was rudely interrupted with my fellow commissioner here earlier that had other questions. Please.
That's fine, I think the commission would delve in on most of the questions that I had, so appreciate your.
And I'll just add, it's not that none of those facilities are doing testing, it's just not at all through us. So some of those facilities do test their animals, but certainly not all of them.
I have a couple of questions that might be helpful as we make decisions as a commission and moving forward. The first is, how does the quality of the samples, or in other words, the percent of the samples that are collected that aren't useful or usable, how does that compare between those that our staff collects and those that are collected by the taxidermist?
In terms of the tissue quality, the taxidermists are really excellent, and they might actually do a better job than our staff. We very rarely get incorrect tissues from taxidermists. I think that's because they're so familiar with skinning deer and the necks, and they've seen lymph nodes. So, and our staff do a great job too. It's a really small percent that's the wrong tissue.
That's very comforting, thank you.
Yeah,
The other question I have is that in these management zone counties, let's just take the ones next to Arkansas, in which we've not had a positive yet. Are we planning to continue or to implement post-season sampling there as well, if necessary, to get the samples?
So, not if we don't find any positives. And, you know, with what we saw with mandatory sampling this past year, the sample size that we get is, when you do the statistical analysis, it is very powerful in terms of being able to detect the disease if it's out there very widely at greater than 1 or 2% in all those counties.
Positive, I'm not the only one that's heard this among the staff or commission, but if it's a county that hasn't had a positive yet, there's a little bit of objection to continue post-season sampling, and I just wondered if that was part of our plan. I know we need to get the samples.
Yeah, the postseason sampling that we've done has been in close proximity to positives, but I understand where your question is going. And through that mandatory sampling, again, the greater number of samples that we get during the regular season does lessen that burden in terms of just for sampling.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Yes?
We've got a question, and just for clarification, maybe it's for you, Tom, I don't know, but I guess I thought that the litigation was over the enforcement of some of our regulations as relates to transportation. Have we never had the authority to test or require the testing?
No,
But the reg changes proposal will give us
Right.
that authority? And
Yeah.
that's gonna go hand in glove with permitting. I mean, if we are permitting, then why can't we, require the testing? Is the question that we're coming up with over here.
because the agency has chosen in the past not to require that. And now that we have changed the regulations, and recall that there's multiple facets of the proposed regulations. Clear records, no importations, fencing standards. It's multifaceted to improve our ability to regulate and work with captive facilities.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Excellent discussion. Don't want to cut it off. Great, thank you. Thanks,
So much.
Commander Hartwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners, Director Pauling, Ms. Maples. This morning, as I come to you again in preparations for this year's effort of mandatory sampling during this fall's firearm deer season, what I'll speak to you today about is in anticipation of the regulations that are in front of you today, and that is the sampling in 25 of the 41 CWD management counties. As you can see on the screen, this year we have resolved to break our structure down into 4 branches. The north branch, the 5 counties there are highlighted in tan color. The east branch is 8 counties, they're highlighted in purple. Central branch is only 2 counties this year in the red. And southwest, while we've got a separation by a county there, we have grouped all 10 of those counties down there under one branch to be run by one branch director. So this is the approach that we're looking at taking here for the 2017 fall firearms deer season opening weekend. Through any good incident command system, you always take a look back and do an after-action review to learn the lessons that you can to improve your process for the next revolution of your opportunities. So this year we went around. I personally went around to all the regional coordination teams, had meetings with our command staff and group coordinators to look at the lessons that we could learn from last year's effort. And out of the lessons that we learned, the first that we wanted to talk about was the use of the incident command system. Use of the incident command system worked exactly as it was designed to do. Our branch directors, our group coordinators, our sampling station leaders, they were all able to plan and lead a manageable portion of the effort. Responsibilities were clear, accountability remained high, and staff recognized the value of the system and appreciated its efficiency. we'll once again manage this operation using Incident Command System in 2017. The second topic touched on by many across the state was supplies. We strive to provide a balance in providing the tools that our staff need while being mindful of the expenditure of tax dollars of all Missourians. This year, we may have erred slightly on thriftiness. So, looking forward, some of the supplies we had proved to be not of high enough quality. Some of the stations ran short on supplies, and that required instant leadership to scramble to move supplies around or make additional purchases. So this year we'll focus on higher quality instruments and ensuring that we have a sufficient amount of supplies needed to take the samples at each of our stations. A third area that was mentioned as I traveled around was data collection and technology. Now I'll just tell you, when you see 26,000 deer in 2 days, your data protocols get put to the test. We currently have subcommittees now working on reformatting our data sheet to make it a more logical flow to speed up the process for hunters as they visit our stations. And we also have another committee looking into the future in the form of electronic data collection. We will have a revised data sheet by this fall, and sometime in the future, we may be seeing electronic data collection out of our stations if we can overcome some of the hurdles. Maps are always a difficult resource to manage. We struggle with a map that's large enough for everyone, including my failing eyes, to be able to read, yet that is small enough to be manageable for the operators at the station.
Give it time, it gets a lot better.
Oh, I'm sure you're right, Mr. Blair. Anyway, we also have a committee working on this. Our folks in resource science have drawn up some new maps that I have approved for use for this year that we're hoping can better meet the needs of not only our staff, but the hunters that visit the station and trying to locate the location of their harvest. Our planning and our communication throughout the effort was commended. This was due in large part to the use of the Incident Command System. We utilized WebEx meetings to have twice a month regular communication between all members of the Incident Command team as well as our CWD management team. This will ensure consistency and that everyone received the same message at the same time. It also allowed opportunity for staff to ask questions to get clarification on instructions. But the highlight for many of our staff appeared to be the team building and camaraderie. Staff were able to see new portions of the state. They were able to work with folks from other divisions that they would normally not have had the opportunity to meet, and they truly had the opportunity to enjoy each other. A common comment that I heard as I traveled across the state visiting stations was, if we do this again next year, we want the same team here at our station. They got to know each other very well during that weekend. This year, once again, we'll be utilizing a timeline to hit key benchmarks as we travel towards November. We fine-tuned our timeline, and it is, as always, comprehensive and fluid. Some of the highlights that we have already achieved this year, we've selected our branch directors, route coordinators, sampling station leaders already to this point. Sampling station leaders are currently working on templates for these station locations. We've provided anticipated lists to outreach and education as they put together the Fall Deer and Turkey booklet. The good news of this, because we built the car last year and we're kind of driving it down the road, we're just fine tuning this year, is that we're able to get ahead of that timeline actually. So what that is going to allow is for staff signups to occur earlier this year than where it did last year. That means the staff will know earlier on in the year where they'll be spending their opening weekend of deer season. As we look forward from this point and planning on down the road, we will have station signups coming out for our staff. We'll be working with some key volunteer organizations to help us out. Not only to help us out specifically on the station, but to help us out with promoting our message and the management of chronic wasting disease that we have here in the state. We'll be planning again for final arrangements as far as logistics go, food, lodging, equipment needs, those type of things, and getting everything ready and out to our key regional offices so they're available for our sampling station leaders prior to opening weekend. Once again, we're taking the time to plan appropriately for mandatory sampling efforts. Many of the plans pieces, as you just heard, are falling into place and will continue to work towards excellence prior to November. By organizing early and once again utilizing the incident command system, we're well on our way to another efficient and successful effort. And with that, I thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Danny. Any questions, Commissioner Bradford?
Just comments, Danny. Outstanding job. You know, big problems provide big opportunities. And the plus that came out of this is the staff and the camaraderie and pulling together so quickly. And now we're fine tuning and we're just in the second year. Unfortunately, the second year, but appreciate the effort the entire agency pulled together. You're unmatched across state government, so applaud those efforts.
Thank you, ma'am.
I would echo some of the comments from Commissioner Bradford and specifically, honing on the volunteerism. I attended some of the social time with the Southeast Deer Study Group conference that was in St. Louis. And when they shared with, peers from around the country, the amount of volunteer hours, I think it blew everybody away. They just, couldn't even grasp that. And when I talked about, the team up in Lincoln Heights in Lewis County and Pope and Young, the people just kept coming up to me and thanking me, Coralie and all the guys did such a big job in helping organize. Every time we turn around, our staff is volunteering. And I've taken this up with the director and deputies. I know we have this policy about not wearing gear, but I think it's kind of heartbreaking because our people are out there so much, and I don't think people even realize how much they're out there because of some of our policy. And I understand there's reasons for it, but I hope we can look for ways to let people know how often we are out there. I think we sell ourselves short. And then number two, I want to make sure I ask, are our people getting fuel cards or getting paid mileage or per diem or food, or is everything coming out of their pocket? What can we do for all these people that are stepping up?
Well, for our staff, sir, they were on the clock during that weekend,
Okay.
and so they were covered in their normal travel expenses as well as salary for the weekend.
We'll make sure.
Yes, sir.
Question about, we have done, I think I heard earlier from Jasmine, approximately 76,000 samples.
Yes, sir.
And, in looking at short range, we're in a short range program at this point because you're organizing for this year, for this season. How many years do we anticipate, or have we anticipated, how many years we're going to continue this? Because it becomes a budget item, certainly to the future,
It is a budget item.
it is. But I'm talking about how long do we see that we have to continue with these zones?
I think the cold hard facts, Commissioner, is for the foreseeable future.
Okay.
And I might make a comment here. This is a tremendous ask of staff because we have a lot of folks like deer hunting. We all know the value of opening weekend. But it also demonstrates that our staff are committed to conservation as well as you folks are. And so given the threat, as Jasmine described, that we've seen in other states, we have no other choice than to make this effort for the foreseeable future. What we're trying to do is as we learn more and we narrow areas of responsibility positives, can we continue to constrict the amount of resources and effort and still be confident that we're finding where these positives are. So it's the emerging 21st century conservation issue in this state line.
Another thing, if I might, Danny, is, you talked about the learning process,
Yes, sir.
data collection. And as we went through this and the various stations that we had, I'm certain that we had complaints.
Very few, Commissioner, very
That's
few.
what I want to try to get to, because at some point, we really need to recognize the the hunters out there, that they recognize what this threat is, and that they're willing to cooperate to subject themselves to this time delay, if you will. And maybe there's something that we can do to try to, whether it's an article in a magazine, to thank the hunters for cooperating.
Yes, sir, and that has been in some of our news releases as we've released results. This would not be possible without the help of our hunters.
Sure.
And they have come to the table. Our compliance rate on this regulation was outstanding. Hunters are realizing the importance of this, and we're very cooperative, very complimentary of our efforts during this last year's opening weekend.
Well, it's a tribute to you and the staff for pulling this off in such a short period of time, that we didn't have an eruption of people complaining about, this process and time delays and everything. So I want to compliment you, and please compliment your team leaders and all the staff that participate in this effort.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any
Thank
other,
you, Mr. Chairman.
any other comments?
Well, I was gonna maybe talk to Joni later, but I'll kind of pony on what Commissioner Bedell said. I see with all this data, there's so much good information here, and the refrain is when we send out an email or we post something on Facebook. I think people that know me have been coming to meetings for 5 or better years now realize I'm always trying to figure out how we can reach out, how we can push more. And, I get these little 3-minute, YouTube vignettes or a link to something, and this is how the community shares stuff. And I think with the graphics that were displayed today to show, I don't think people get the problem. I realize that you have compliance from the hunters and the people that were there, were compliant. But I talk to a lot of people that own land and hunt deer, and I still don't think they really have a grasp of the issue. And I think there's a huge opportunity to take some of the graphics and some of the data we have and create versions of that, 1.5 or 3-minute teaser to a 5-minute, more, to a 15-minute, really in-depth explanation of the challenge. And that's the kind of stuff that people will share. And that's what I was hoping to, encourage some creative thinking and take advantage of that media, that trend in social media or sharing.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and we do have a multifaceted communication plan for this exact operation, and I'll be sure to share that with Joe Jarrett as well, our communications specialist for this effort as we move forward as well.
Anyone else? Danny, just a closing remark from your chair here. Long time ago, a guy once remarked that the most important thing that we had to have as an agency, the most important asset, was the sustaining public will, public that was supportive of what we're doing. This was earned by these actions. It's earned by every employee every day, but this time in particular, there isn't anyone that came to any of these check stations that didn't see that and experience that firsthand. And how enormously positive that was. That's going to buy us a lot of credibility, a lot of tolerance, a lot of patience from our public as we figure out what the hell to do with this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Now, Dr. Keller.
Hey, good morning, Commissioners Bradford, Blair, Bedell, Chair Murphy, and Director Polly. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present the results of our 2016-2017 deer season and propose our regulation changes for the upcoming 2017-2018 deer season. So I'm going to begin today with a report of our harvest totals across all of our portions. So you'll see these here, and then the percent change from the previous year's harvest totals for those portions. So there have been a few notable changes in harvest totals compared to the past year. Our early youth season harvest was down 18% compared to last year's early youth season harvest. Now this occurs during a weekend in October, and this past weekend there were highs in the 80s, both of those days, so that likely contributed to that lower harvest this year as well as probably lower participation during that. portion. However, we did see an increase of 27% during harvest in our late season. Now, we did make changes to this portion last year. We moved it from January up into late November and immediately after, or after the weekend after the November portion, and we extended it from 2 days to 3 days. And this is the highest late use season portion that we've ever reported. We did see a decrease of 32% in our antlerless season portion harvest. We also made changes to this portion this past year. We reduced the length of that portion from 12 days down to 3 days. And so we did expect to see a decrease in harvest during this portion. That was the intention of making that change on that portion. However, our November portion, which usually constitutes the greatest amount of our overall deer harvest, was really spot on with where we were last year. It was only 0.3% less than last year's harvest total. Overall, we also saw minor decreases in alternative methods in the archery season harvest, but overall, we're about 3% less than where we were last year and 5% less than the 10-year mean. However, we still harvested more than 250,000 of deer this past year, and we still rank within the top 3 states in the Midwest with regards to deer harvest.
Dr. Keller, do you think that's the decline is a reflection of deer herd, reflection of the timing changes, or is it perhaps also influenced by the number of antlerless permits that are available to some people?
It's certainly a combination of things. I think it's more of a reflection. As you'll see, our November portion was really close to where it was last year. So those decreases that you see in the other portions were due to some weather issues. So we had a really warm, not only early season, but also early archery season. Our acorn production was also a little bit higher than it was last year, so I think those played a role in some of those decreases. But I think that November portion harvest really says the most as far as where our deer population is. It's probably about the same as where it was last year. This slide shows our success rates for the firearms deer seasons as well as the archery success rate over the past 6 years. So you'll see that our firearms success rate generally is between 35 and 40%. And so for 2016, we were right in the middle there at about 37% success. Our archery success rates tends to be a little bit below 20%, and again, right on target there with 18.7% success rate this past year. Now, I do want to spend a little bit more time and talk about our archery season because there's a rather large regulation change that went into effect this past year, and that was the allowance of crossbows as a method of harvest during archery season. As I've mentioned, our archery harvest was a little bit below where it was last year. And here's another view of our archery harvest over the past 10 years. So a little bit less than what it was last year. We do, during the telecheck process, ask hunters when they are checking a deer on an archery permit whether they used a crossbow to harvest that deer. So we're able to monitor the effect of the crossbows on our overall archery harvest. And we did find that 30% of those hunters used a crossbow to harvest their deer. So although we had 30% of our hunters using crossbows, we did not see an increase in the overall deer harvest during that season. However, we did see an increase in the number of individuals hunting during archery season. So here we have the number of individuals with archery permits over the past 6 years. You can see in that 2016 it did increase. It was 8% higher than the 2015 numbers and 9% increase from our 5-year mean. If we look at that by the age class of those permit buyers, we'll see that there were higher increases in our older hunters as well as the younger hunters. So a 9% increase in those hunters older than 41 years of age having an archery permit versus 4% in those in the 16 to 40 year age class, 8% in the 11 to 15 year age class, and 66% increase in those archery hunters less than 10. And this was an intention of this regulation change, was to increase retention of our older hunters and recruit younger hunters into the archery season. If we look at the archery hunter numbers and compare them to our overall hunter numbers, which is in green here over the past 6 years, and the firearm hunters numbers, which is in red, we'll see that although we had an increase in the number of archery hunters this past year, we actually had a decrease in the number of total hunters in the landscape. And that was due to a decrease in the number of firearms hunters participating. Again, this is one of the reasons that we decided to allow crossbows as a method to prevent further decreases in hunter participation. I will note that 501,576 total hunters we had this past year, it is the lowest that it's been over the past 6 years. It's a 2% increase, 1% decrease from the past year, a 2% decrease from the past 5 years. Now, so it certainly is a concern that there seems to be a slightly decreasing trend here, but I will say that this trend is not as steep decline as other states have seen. Particularly Michigan has seen an 8% decrease. So again, that is one of the reasons that we're trying to increase hunter recruitment and retention. And we do appear to be a little bit more successful in retaining hunters than some other states.
Commissioner Wood?
Just to clarify, are these hunters or these permits?
These are hunters, individual hunters.
So if I buy a permit, how do you know I'm hunting? Are these permit sales or these hunters?
These are hunters. So, I'm sorry.
What I'm trying to get at is we sell permits. How do you determine how many people are actually hunting? If I buy a permit, you don't know whether I'm hunting or not.
That's correct. So these are permit buyers. We're assuming that those people who buy a permit are hunting. That's correct.
So that's based on permit sales.
Correct. But
So that leads to my next point of,
But there's also a post-season survey that talks about how many days you hunted or not, right?
yes, we do surveys after the season where we look at, yes, the number of hunters that
so
actually.
the fact of the matter is, this is data that's assumptions made. These are people who are buying tags. That's how you determine the number of hunters.
Correct.
Okay, so taking that further, what are we doing, and this may not be for you, but to take back to the workshop is to make that more automated. This app that we have has just gotten such rave reviews about the online ability. You know, is there a algorithm where I can just punch in my county and acres and just actually give me, here's the maximum tags that you can buy, you know, buy now, yes, and, you know, just that's an automatic, you know, we've talked about making this a repetitive deal. Those are the kind of things, if this is based upon permanent sales, what are we doing to make that more automated, more, hey, I'm doing this once and every year I know it's redone, those kind of things. Sorry, just, I thought it was a good time to interject that question. Hijacked your presentation.
All right. This figure shows the those successful hunters that were reporting deer on archery permit and the age distribution of those hunters. So the frequency distribution of blue here is those hunters that use the vertical or regular bow to harvest their deer, and the red distribution is those that use the crossbow to harvest their deer. So if we look at first of all, you can notice that obviously more hunters were using vertical bows, about 70% as mentioned that were using vertical bows to harvest their deer versus 30% using crossbows. If we look at the mean to median age between those two groups, we see that our crossbow hunters are on average about 10 years older than our vertical bow hunters. And this is spot on with what other states have seen in regards to crossbow hunters. Looking at the sex and the age of deer taken between those two weapon types, we see virtually no difference in selectivity between vertical bow hunters and crossbow hunters. So in summary, in our first inaugural year of crossbows as a legal method of archery harvest, we did not see any change in our archery deer harvest as a result of that. However, this is based on 1 year of data, and as I mentioned, there's many other factors that affect harvest success, especially weather. As I mentioned, we had a particularly warm early archery season, and then acorn production as well. It being a little bit higher this year than last year, those probably both played into that 4% decrease we saw in our archery harvest. However, we did see that archery participation did increase, especially among those youth and older hunters, which again was an intention of that regulation change. We also did not see a difference in the sex and age class of deer that were taken. I didn't present this map today, but there's really relatively little difference in the geographic distribution of crossbow versus vertical bow hunters. Two things that we'd like to continue to look at in the future is whether there is a difference in success rates between crossbow and archery bow hunters, as well as wounding rates. And in order to estimate these statistics, we do need that the survey data that we conduct each year. So we send out 35,000 surveys to archery deer hunters this year. We're currently on the third mailing of those surveys, so we don't have these statistics estimated yet, but we should have those late summer, early fall. And again, we're going to continue to monitor the effect of this change on our archery deer harvest for the foreseeable future. Moving on, there's another item I'd like to point out with regards to, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Commissioner
I'm
Wood?
sorry, Barb. Out of the ones that you send out, what percent return do you anticipate?
I'm honestly not sure what our percent return rate is on that. You know, Jason?
Would you only know about
About 45%.
Would it be cheaper to have a pop-up when you're buying apps to do the survey from last
that certainly would be one way to get some information, but then that would bias that towards hunters that are using the app, that's probably younger hunters. But as more and more hunters continue to use the app, I think that's something that we can look at, gaining information through that avenue as well.
And also, when you did this graph, you also, I noticed, to me, it's stunning how much 6 to 8 or 10-year-olds are using crossbows as a recruitment tool. And that's pretty neat.
So, one other item with regards to our past year's deer harvest that I'd like to point out is what we saw this year with regards to the sex and age composition of our deer harvest. So here you're looking at, over the past 30 years, the makeup of our deer harvest composed of button bucks, antlered bucks, and does. So you can see from about the 1980s to the year 2000s, we generally had higher harvest of antlered bucks. The intention then was to grow deer populations. In about the year 2000, we started to have the intention of controlling some deer populations in northern and central Missouri, and so we shifted harvest pressure to the doe segment of our population. Due to some historic liberalized antlerless opportunities and several severe hemorrhagic disease outbreaks, in 2014, we reduced the antlerless permit allocation through much of the state to 1 or 2 antlerless permits. As a result, again, we shifted harvest pressure onto the antlered buck segment of our population, and that trend has continued for the past 3 years. However, you will note that in 2016, we had a record high antlered buck harvest, and you can see that the doe segment of harvest has started to diverge a little bit more greatly from the antlered buck portion of our harvest. Now you'll remember that we reduced that antlerless portion of the firearm season from 12 days down to 3 days, so that certainly played a role in some of that reduced doe harvest that we saw this past year. I do want to discuss a little bit more in depth the factors that contributed to that high antlered buck harvest. So here, this map that you're looking at on the left is the percent change in antlered buck harvest throughout the state by county. So those counties in those darker red are exhibiting decreases in antlered buck harvest, and those counties, as you move into the green and the blue, and the darker blue, are exhibiting greater increases in antlered buck harvest relative to last year. So if we look at these counties that are contributing to that increase, we see that 6 counties in particular contributed to a large part of that antlered buck increase. These 6 counties were counties where we removed the antlered horn restriction last year. And so as a result of that, because yearling bucks are antlered bucks, there were a lot more antlered bucks available for harvest in those counties, and that's where we saw these greatest increases in antlered buck harvest. These 6 counties alone explained 35% of that increase in antlered buck harvest. That's a lot for just 6 counties. However, there are other factors that contributed to that increase. One is the continuation of the antlered point restriction in 41 of those counties. So these counties that I've highlighted in particular in northeast Missouri had the highest antlered buck harvest that they've had, with the exception in some cases of 2011 and 2012. Prior to 2007, 2007 was the year before that antlered point restriction was put into place in those counties. So this is the highest antlered buck harvest they've had since that time. So likely what we're seeing here is the continuation of the antlered point restriction working to produce more legal bucks, making it to the age that they can be harvested. We also saw some increases in southern Missouri with regards to antlered buck harvest, just a handful of counties here. However, this is more reflective of just an overall increasing deer population in southern Missouri. So the proportion increases of antlered buck harvest in these counties was the same proportion of increase that we saw in the antlerless portion as well. So it's most likely we're just seeing the reflection of slowly increasing deer populations in this area. And then finally, we might also be seeing a slight increase in hunter selectivity for antlered bucks. So again, we conduct these surveys post-season. One survey that we conduct, the hunter opinion survey, we conduct every few years. And we'll ask the hunters about their plan when they're hunting, whether they are selecting for larger antlered bucks, whether they're just selecting for the first legal deer that comes along. So we're able to monitor their selectivity over time. So prior to 2016, the most recent hunter opinion survey we conducted was 2013. You can see that we are seeing a change from that time period. So we're seeing that those hunters that identify themselves as primarily buck hunters seems to have increased, whereas those that are just general deer hunters, potentially harvesting the first legal deer that comes along, slightly decreased. So again, this might just be a blip in the radar. It might be a trend that we're seeing over time. We'll have to continue to monitor that. But this certainly could have also played a role statewide in some of that higher antlered buck harvest that we saw.
Wouldn't there seem to be a need for two different kind of sets of data for private landowners versus our public land hunters.
I will say that most of our hunters are private land hunters. It's a small portion of hunters that we survey that say that they use exclusively public land. More questions? With that, I'm going to move on to our 2017-2018 deer regulation recommendations. So the first recommendation, if you have in your packet, is simply those dates that have already been established. The archery is established in code, and you've already approved the firearms deer season dates. As a reminder, we didn't make any changes in those dates from the previous year. Our second recommendation is to remove the concealed carry permit requirement for deer turkey hunters. Again, this is in accordance with that recent change in law, which no longer requires Missourians to have a permit to conceal carry, so we're simply aligning our wildlife code with that change in law. And to change the labeling requirements to account for those paperless permits that we allow hunters to have on the Mo Hunting app. We are requiring that they label their deer, but they don't have to have a permit to label their deer. Our third recommendation is with regards to the change that we made last year where we reduced the number of antlered bucks that hunters could take from 3 down to 2, with only 1 being harvested prior to the November portion of the firearm season. An inadvertent result of this change is that those youth that we had participating in early archery season and happened to take an antlered buck could then not take their second antlered buck until November portion began, and so that is after the early youth season portion. So we're just simply changing the wording to allow those youth that participate in early archery season and happen to take an antlered buck to then take their second antlered buck during early youth season, which occurs prior to November portion. Our fourth recommendation is to increase the number of firearms Angeles permits for Ballinger County from 0 to 1. So this map here is what the Angeles permit allocation as far as firearms Angeles permits were for the state for last year. So those counties in green have 2 Angeles permits, orange is 1, and we have 13 counties in the southeast portion of Missouri which had 0 Angeles permits allotted to them. So the reason that we have been so conservative in this area of Missouri over time is that it had a low deer numbers. But over the past 5 to 10 years, the deer population has been slowly increasing, so we continue to evaluate whether it's appropriate to maintain those conservative regulations in those counties over time. So beginning in 2014, we allotted 1 Angeles permit for Cape Girardeau County with the intention of looking at what that did to overall deer harvest and deer numbers to evaluate whether we could slowly add other counties to an Angeles permit. So with regards to Cape Girardeau County, we did see a 35% increase in doe harvest as a result of adding that Angeles permit. So when evaluating Ballinger County, this does have a slowly growing deer population. It has comparable deer and hunter numbers to other counties in the state that do have 1 or more Angeles permits. So in conducting population simulations, we looked at what would happen to that deer population if we increased harvest to the amount that Cape Girardeau saw and above that. And we saw that for the most part, the deer population would remain stable up to about a 50% increase in Angeles permits. So again, given that Cape Girardeau saw a 35% increase, given that the deer numbers and hunter numbers in Ballinger County are similar to other areas of the state where we do allow an Angeles permit, we are recommending that we increase that from 0 to 1. Our fifth recommendation is with regards to the CWD management zone and the new counties that we're adding to that management zone. And so these regulation changes go along with being in a management zone. They involve removing the antler point restriction, increasing availability of firearms and landowner Angeles permit, expanding the firearms Angeles portion, as well as the feeding and mineral supplementation ban. So I'll walk through this regulation change with regards to those new counties and which are being affected by each of these changes. Again, we are proposing that we increase the CWD management zone counties to include 41 total counties. Again, it was 29 counties, we're proposing 41. Those are highlighted in the blue arrows here. So removing the antler point restriction will affect Benton, Cedar, Hickory, and St. Clair County. So what you're looking at here on the right is the map of those counties which will be under an antler point restriction during 2017-2018. So you'll see that those counties highlighted with those yellow arrows, we were removing that antler point restriction. This is due to finding that two CWD positive deer in St. Clair County. Increasing firearms Angeles permits to 2, again, will affect these counties here highlighted in yellow: Berry, Benton, Cedar, Dade, Hickory, Ozark, Polk, St. Francis, St. Genevieve, Stone, and Caney counties. I've included Ballinger County in there as well, just because we are increasing the entry list permits there in the wildlife code wording from 0 to 1. Increasing landowner firearms entry list permits to 2 will affect Berry, Dade, Ozark, Polk, St. Francis, St. Genevieve, Stone, and Caney counties. And expanding the entry list portion will cover Berry, Dade, Ozark, Polk, St. Francis, St. Genevieve, Stone, and Caney counties. Sixth recommendation, with regards to the CWD mandatory sampling that we do, again, we are selecting now individual counties to be included in that mandatory sampling recommendation, and we are selecting 25 of those counties, which Jasmine has already highlighted here. So these are those 25 counties in the lighter orange that you see that we're recommending that mandatory sampling take place this year. These will be included in the fall deer interpretation booklet. For seventh recommendations, with regards to our CWD management seals that we issue in our core areas, these go out to landowners of 5 acres or more. As a reminder, we have 3 core areas in the state: the Macon Lynn core area, the Adair core area, and new this year will be the Franklin core area. So this is in northern Franklin County where we found those 3 positive deer. So new for those landowners in that area this year will be the first time they received this packet of management seals. These management seals allow us to harvest additional deer in areas where we know the disease is established beyond what our county allotment is. So it allows us to remove more deer and it allows us to test more deer for the disease. And then finally, our 8th and 9th recommendations is the approval of those conservation area deer and turkey hunting regulations and approval of the managed deer hunts for 2017-2018. With that, I can leave these up here for discussion. If there are any additional questions, I'll thank you for your time.
Any questions? Commissioner Bradford?
No questions, Margaret, but, comment on the crossbow regulation. Obviously, the right thing to do, 66% increase for kids, that's outstanding. So, a lot of staff's effort in making the recommendation and carrying it out here, so hopefully we can continue that. As well as the older folks, that enjoyed it themselves, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Blair?
At the risk of Commissioner Goodell punching me, I would say that increase in the youth, because the crossbow kind of makes me wonder about afternoon turkey hunting, and what it would do to get young people out after soccer or their morning activities, but that's discussion for another time of year. You were going kind of fast. I thought I heard you say something about the tagging. You notch your permit, but you aren't getting paper.
So with our bow hunting app, we have the ability for hunters just to have their permit on their app to show it to agents. And so in the code, it said that you needed to label your deer with a permit, with the actual paper permit, which did not align with us now allowing them to have that app. We're still requiring that hunters label their deer with their name and conservation number and so forth, but they don't have to have a permit to do that. They just have to properly label their deer.
Because they have to permit on.
Right.
Right, then.
Commissioner Goodell?
I've been on the commission, I think, 7 years, maybe a little longer. I've never heard a faster presentation of so much information. Are you sure you're from Missouri?
Actually, grew up in Texas, but
I mean, you had to be. I've never heard anyone from Missouri talk as fast as you talk. Were you an auctioneer? Did you come from? I guess we'll just have to follow your recommendations. I am curious as to how we gathered all this data in this period of time.
what data specifically?
I'm sorry,
What data are you referring to?
all of the data that we have looked at in 10 minutes.
It takes all year.
Okay, very good. Obviously, you know what you're talking about. And we'll take that for granted. Thank you, I meant no discredit to you for being quick. Thank you. I assume we're gonna be getting some information from you, Tom, on most motion.
Yeah, I'm gonna bike slow this thing down.
So we can follow what's gonna happen here. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Keller.
Very good.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Excellent work.
Before I continue, Commission, this is gonna take some time, so I just wanna, I'm gonna be very.
I'd like to stick to this. Now, I want to take a break after this. I'm gonna move right through this and then take a break because we have some things to, that we need some attention to.
Well, a couple things before I move on, and I'll be as quick as I possibly can, but this is a little promulgation, so we need to be a bit deliberate.
Yep.
One thing I'd like to say is that Conservation Federation of Missouri is gonna be an active partner this fall with, chronic waste and disease sampling at our sampling station. They're actively engaged, our staff are working to integrate them, so compliments to them, working with us on that effort. I do wanna make one clarification. Commissioner Blair asked me if we have we ever, as an agency, required sampling for captive facilities? We did prior to 2009. I have to stand corrected on that. For whatever reason, the agency chose to do, and it was a collaborative effort with MDA, and so it came out of our regs, and we have decided now to put it back in so that we know what's going on. So, Commissioner, I wanted to clarify that statement.
I hate to change direction here, but perhaps I best. Let's take a 15-minute break. We'll come back. Okay, 15 minutes,
Then I'll get on to the action.
and then we'll go to the action items. Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, to expedite the conversation here, what I will do is go immediately to formal action items, and we'll move through it at a methodical pace here. Recognizing that that we had inadvertently done something to limit opportunity for youth season, what we're going to do is to correct that. So, given that we weren't intending to limit their opportunity, I request the approval of final order rulemaking 3 CSR 10-7.431 deer hunting seasons. And this general provisions will allow youth hunters who harvested an antler deer during the archery season to take their second antler deer during the early youth portion of the Fall Farms deer season. Effective date is June 1, 2017, and I request that in the form of action.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion
Thank you.
carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the discussion, recalling the discussion that Barb presented about the things that we need to do to improve our ability to manage chronic wasting disease. I have three additional orders of rulemaking that modify the current regulations to minimize the prevalence and limit the spread of chronic wasting disease. Again, these become effective June 1. Under 3 CSR 10-7.434 deer, this will allow landowner privilege to increase the number of firearm antlerless permits issued to landowners with 75 or more acres from 1 to 2 in the new management zone counties that Barb described. Under 3 CSR 10-7.435 deer, special harvest provisions will remove the antler point restriction within the new management counties that Barb described. And under 3 CSR 10-7.437 deer, antlerless deer hunting permit, the availability will increase the number of farms antlerless permits deer hunters can obtain from 1 to 2 in the management zone counties. And also, this also includes greater flexibility managing the deer population in Bolivar County by increasing the availability of antlerless permits from 0 to 1. With that, Mr. Chair, I request commission approval of these action items.
Could I have a motion to approve all three?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about this? We've heard good justifications, I think, for each. Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, the next.
Hold on, just a comment.
If I might make a comment, I keep looking forward to the day where we're gonna see something in a reg change that relates to the landowner permits of 5 acres and, readdressing what landowner privileges should be. And, there's a discussion, I believe, about we're leaving a lot of federal matching funds on the table. And even for a nominal fee, if people were paying for a tag of $2.50, there's, I think it was, if I recall, it was some $900,000 or more that the agency might attract. I keep hoping that we're gonna tackle that.
We are tackling that, Commissioner, and it's, then you have deliberations about timing. And when we do that, so it is continue to work towards that goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the next series of recommendations will align the wildlife code with the recent statutory changes regarding constitutional carry of concealed firearm, modifies the labeling requirements to accommodate deer and turkey hunters with electronic permits. So with that, Commissioner, I request approval for proposed amendments to 3 CSR 10-7.431 deer hunting seasons general provisions, 3 CSR 10-7.432 deer archery hunting season, and 3 CSR 10-7.455 turkey season methods and limits. And again, that addresses the constitutional carry and the labeling requirements that we are bringing up to date because of electronic permit.
I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to, again, to make sure that we have our wildlife code aligned with what we need to do for chronic wasting disease. Recall that we have a formula to establish management zones and management zone counties. The next action item is a recommendation to require hunters to submit their harvest for mandatory sampling of 25 of the 41 counties in CWD management zone counties. And this would be for the opening week in the fall farms deer season, which is November 11th and 11 and 12 of this year. These 25 counties represent the new additions to the management zone for the variety of reasons that Barb described, and she also listed in the county, those 25 counties. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I request approval of this action item as described.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, the final two action items I have here deal with the proposed changes to current conservation area regulations that you find in your packet, and also pertains to the changes that, pertains to managed hunts, includes recommendations for hunts held on properties owned by the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers, and National Park Service. These are also listed in your Regulations Committee report.
These 435 through 455. 35, 37, 31, 32, 55. That's what we're talking about.
No, these are the ones that are listed by reference, code by reference in our deer book.
We're out of the code book now, right? We're talking about the deer book.
We're by, code by reference. When we make these changes and the commission approves these, by reference, they are part of our deer season. It's listed in our annual deer turkey brochure.
Okay, do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries, Tom.
With that, that concludes my formal report in regards to action items. I would like to bring up two other comments, that we continue to receive comments on commercial turtle harvest, and that we will begin deliberations in June of this year when we'll have a presentation to the commission about the attributes of commercial turtle harvest and global perspective of turtle populations. And that will kick off our formal discussion of how we might adjust the wildlife code as it pertains to commercial harvest of turtles. And so there's more to come on that, and we'll begin our formal deliberations at the mid-year code review that is on July 27th. And with that, unless there's formal other questions, this concludes the Regulations Committee.
Thank you, Tom. Any comments or questions?
I would like to make a comment, Tom, and that is that we encourage continued participation by the public. I think it's great that they come forth and make recommendations to the Regs Committee. I notice you're meeting again, I guess, next week.
Yes, correct.
May the 24th. And we appreciate the fact that people do come forward.
Absolutely.
It's an important part of the process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Commissioner Blair?
No, I echo Commissioner Fidel's comments.
Thank you, Tom. I think we're ready for Lisa. Good morning.
Morning, Commissioners, Director Collins, Ms. Maples. I have the next agenda item, item number 7. It is an action item, and this is a request for timber sale approval. Normally when I make these presentations, I tell you a little bit about the objectives of the sale, and a lot of times that's kind of the same, because good forest management looks the same a lot of times. But I, as you can imagine, I do a pretty good study on these timber sales that the field staff have prepared before I bring them forward. And I found something really interesting about this one that I thought could help me illustrate a good point. And that point is that forest management is a long-term proposition. You know, it takes close to 100 years to grow a mature red oak tree, and quite a bit longer than that to grow a mature white oak tree. So it's really important that over time we stay hitched to that process and see it through. This particular compartment, compartment 3 on the Suncoast Conservation Area, was acquired by the department in the early 1990s. And part of it was a part of the old Hartshorn State Forest, but most of it we acquired in the early 90s from the Kerr-McGee Corporation. And it had been abused. It had been largely high graded, diameter limit type cut. So we did a great effort in the first entry in the mid-90s and late 90s to go in and inventory, make recommendations, and try to continue to improve forest health and create diverse wildlife habitat and start improving the forest resource there. Well, this particular area then, once we think things are going along pretty good, got hit by the derecho. So it just goes to show you too that sometimes that long-term strategy that you have is interrupted by natural processes. And so now with this reentry period, we're going back in nearly 20 years into this process and have an opportunity not only to continue to correct things after the derecho, but to continue the process we initially set out on, that sometimes takes 40 to 50 years to get on the right course again. So with that, it's just an interesting little background on this particular track that I enjoyed reading about anyway. So I will move into our standard recommendation, though, as we continue this journey of continuous improvement of the forest. In requesting your approval to advertise and sell approximately 960,729 board feet of timber on 754 acres in compartment 3 of the Suncoast Conservation Area in Shannon County.
I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Morning, Tony.
Good morning, Chairman Murphy, Commissioners, Director Pauley, Ms. Rhonda. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce the next speaker, who is here today to provide an overview of the new look for the department's flagship magazine, The Conservationist. The simple elegance of the new design belies the complex process undertaken by magazine staff, led by graphic artist Stephanie Thurber, to both maintain our current readership and reach out to new readers at the same time. Stephanie has a Bachelor of Journalism from the University of Missouri-Columbia, where she emphasized her studies in magazine design. She started working for the department in 2007, right after she graduated from college. During these 10 years, Stephanie has worked on a variety of projects, including the foundation of Explorer Magazine, NBC's editorial style guide, and most recently, the Missouri Conservationist Media Kit. And while she doesn't like to pick favorites, one of her most, let's say, interesting projects was the Diseases of Missouri Fish and Wildlife Field Guide. For fun, Stephanie passes along all the fun facts and wonders she learns about from work to her friends and family, but especially to her 4-year-old daughter. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie.
Welcome, Stephanie.
Good morning, Commissioners. Director Pauley, Ms. Maples. As Jody said, I'm here today to discuss the new look to our Missouri Conservationist magazine. The Missouri Conservationist was first published in July 1938 as an 8-page quarterly tabloid. In that first issue, Commissioner E. Sidney Stevens laid out a strong and straightforward foundation for the magazine. He wrote that it was being issued to provide information for the guidance of individuals and groups interested in the conservation of wildlife. From that very first issue, 79 years ago, the Missouri Conservationist magazine has served as the department's flagship publication, doing just as Mr. Stevens intended. The magazine is free to Missouri residents, and we now have over 520,000 subscribers. So why change? Today, magazines typically get redesigned every 5 to 7 years. They do this to freshen the magazine's look, stay up to date with reader preferences, to reach a new audience, or to reflect a shift in the publication's priorities. The Missouri Conservationist hasn't had a proper redesign since 2007. At 10 years old, the layout is outdated. Touch-ups and minor updates over the past decade have left the magazine a bit disjointed in terms of its visual identity. Our role as the department
Departments magazine is to connect our readers with the department's mission, goals, and vision. We're always looking for ways that we can strengthen that connection. For this project, our task was to breathe new life into the design so that our content stays relevant to readers. We're still competing for people's time and attention even though we're free, so it's imperative that we not rest on our laurels. To help us reach our goal, magazine staff identified some key objectives. We knew we wanted to freshen up the magazine's look while staying true to its history. We want to offer readers content that they can easily see a benefit from, answering their question, what's in it for me? We want to emphasize reader-friendly, info-rich content, and by that we mean packaging our content in a way that readers can quickly digest and retain information. And we want to engage readers through social media, using icons throughout the magazine as visual cues. We will also be working with the communications team on directing our social media users back to the magazine, encouraging them to sign up for a subscription or to share information. So we don't undertake a major redesign just for the fun of it. All changes must be deliberate, logical, and purposeful. So we needed to understand who our current readers are, their demographics, what they like about the magazine, and how they use it. And we wanted to know more about current magazine reading behaviors so we could realign ourselves with the industry's best practices. All of this was done as an initial research phase. In order to learn more about our readers, in spring 2016, we conducted 4 focus groups around the state and sent out a written survey to over 20,000 subscribers. Over 14,000 subscribers participated in the written survey, which is a response rate of 76%. This high response rate is a testament to our readers and the connection they have with the department. From a statistical standpoint, this meant that we had sound data to use. From the surveys, we found that our reader demographic is pretty narrow. 75% of our readers are male, 96% are white, and 90% are over the age 60. To compare this to our last reader survey from 2006, the male to female ratio is very similar. Our race breakdown is essentially the same. The big change is age. Past surveys showed a much broader range spread out over generations. So now we know who our current readers are, we need to know what they like about the magazine. We found out that the more visually oriented the content is, the higher it is ranked. Visuals serve as a hook, catching the reader's eye and pulling them into the story. Specifically, photos of animals and plants are preferred over people, and photographs are preferred over artwork. Readers also told us they like content they can learn from, so sections with a greater potential for learning were ranked higher, like the plants and animals section and feature articles. All of these findings in the written survey were also consistent with our focus groups as well. For how readers use the magazine, 53% of those surveyed said that they use the conservationists to plan outdoor activities. And they cited the outdoor hunting and fishing calendar and places to go sections as being the most helpful. While we gathered data specifically from conservationist readers, staff researched industry trends in magazine reading behaviors and design. We know that paper-based reading stimulates emotions and desires. It drives sensory involvement, which contributes to its impact on readers. And while people are getting more mobile and digital savvy, print is not a dying media. The total number of adults who read magazines has actually risen over the past 5 years. And people of all ages, especially millennials, enjoy reading print magazines. Design trends that we've noticed included using brighter colors, adopting a modern, clean design, while at the same time adding elements of depth and having attention to detail. After that initial research phase, we realized that the biggest challenge we faced was reconciling our current narrow demographic with wanting to foster new generations of conservationist readers. We saw from our industry research that adults of all ages read magazines. We are a general audience magazine for anyone who loves nature, so we saw this as an opportunity to expand our readership. This was a constant balancing act throughout the project because we had to make design choices that would appeal to a broader audience, but that wouldn't alienate our current reader base. In response to all we had learned and to address our challenge head-on, magazine staff came up with a new design theme. Based on the strong connection our readers have with photos and graphics, we have committed to a stronger visual presence, using cutout photography and infographics to engage readers and draw them into our stories. To further define our new look, we have a rich, earthy color palette and updated typography to enhance readability. Overall, the layout is modern and clean. Whole sections were rethought and reorganized to include more sidebars, graphics, and supporting information. We built pages with flexibility in mind so that as a magazine staff, we could be more agile on our end, allowing for last-minute changes to occur before deadline with relative ease. And one thing I wanted to point out on this slide is an example of how we made changes in order to strengthen that connection between the department and our readers. And that's our director's letter. Before we had sort of a round robin of authors who all wonderfully represented the department, but we found from our focus groups that people were a little confused by that. They wanted to put a face with the department. And so by putting the director's letter and photo in each issue, we're establishing consistency, which translates to reliability and then builds trust. Again, we're strengthening that connection from the department to our readers. And over the next few slides, we have a sampling of pages from the magazine's new look. Nature Lab is a new section highlighting research the department uses in order to improve our fish, forest, and wildlife management. This page has examples of the info-rich content I was talking about earlier. The page is easy to navigate and scan, while cutout photography hooks the reader and brings them to infographics and brief explainers that help tell the technical side of our story. Surveys and focus groups show that readers appreciate knowing the more technical side of conservation, so this treatment is a direct result of that. This is also a perfect place for all of our CWD maps and graphics that we just saw to go and really get that message out to readers. In Brief is a new 5-page section that will include conservation news articles, aging column, I Am Conservation, Ask NBC, and our very popular What Is It photo. This section allows us a great deal of flexibility, and that's because the content that goes into this section can go anywhere within these 5 pages, so the design can accommodate the content organically. It doesn't have to be forced to fit into a set space. And this slide just shows us the opening page to the section, which will begin with a prominent news item. Again, a great place to highlight CWD mandatory sampling efforts. Get Outside is a new section where we highlight ways our readers can connect with nature. These are ideas and events people can go physically do or see each month. Examples run anywhere from a specific program offered at a nature center, or simply pointing out which flowers are in bloom, or what critters are around. This page is another example of how visually rich the new layout will be. The page is meant to be scanned, the design is fun and inviting, and the information is packaged in bite-sized pieces. Our Places to Go section gives a little more legroom to help our readers discover nature. Along with photos of the area, readers can scan these pages to quickly find out where the area is, what they can go do and see, encouraging them to go visit for themselves. Through the survey and focus groups, readers told us that Places to Go is a section that they frequently use to help plan outdoor activities. Wild Guide is our section dedicated to plants and animals. We repackaged this section to be more like a field guide entry because we know from our research that readers rank learning about plants and animals as one of their favorite magazine topics. This new format still shows beautiful photos of plants and animals and goes in depth on one species each month. And the revamped outdoor calendar of fishing, hunting, and trapping seasons is much easier to read and find information, which is important to us because we know from our research this section is the most helpful in planning outdoor activities. And I'll mention that this page is now placed on the inside back cover of the magazine, so it's very easy for readers to rip out and keep on their fridge or put their next to the existing calendars or anywhere they would reference it easily. And finally, our back cover will be a photo from the department's Instagram account. This space is dedicated to photos that, again, we know readers love and respond to, and it's a big nod to our social media, something that will appeal to a younger audience. While these new pages look different, at its core, the conservationist content remains true to its founding principle, to inform and guide those interested in the conservation of fish, forests, and wildlife. We're still connecting the department with readers every month, helping them understand what we do and how it impacts their very quality of life. But the print magazine is only half the story. All of these efforts are not only going to be seen in the print magazine, but the conservationist digital formats, our flipbook and online PDF. The Flipbook edition is an interactive digital magazine that readers can view on their phones or tablets, either through our website or our mobile app, the MoCom Mag app. It has the exact same content as our print magazine, but with bonus content such as photo galleries and videos. The number of Flipbook downloads has steadily gone up since it was first made available in 2016. For our May issue, we currently have approximately 24,000 Flipbook downloads just for that issue alone. Our online PDF is available as a digital subscription, where readers can sign up to be notified via email each month when the issue is ready. And we currently have over 22,000 online subscribers. The number on the slide is already outdated. So now that the bulk of our efforts are underfoot, we're looking at next steps. When the magazine hits mailboxes in July, we'll be looking forward to reader feedback, especially through letters to the editor and social media posts. To coincide with the July issue, we're developing outreach efforts to get as many people as possible to see our renewed magazine. These efforts will focus heavily on reaching 20 to 40-year-olds through mobile and digital ads. We're still working out details for this campaign, but we know that these ads will largely appear on social media in order to direct people back to the department's magazine, where they are encouraged to sign up for a subscription. I'll end with one more quote from Missouri conservationist editor James Keith. In July 1978, on reflection of the magazine's 40th anniversary issue, he wrote, "A magazine necessarily reflects the character of a department and those of the people who produce it. Missouri is a national leader in conservation, and our magazine reflects that. Just as the department changes over the years to best meet the needs of Missouri citizens, so too does the magazine." And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Bradford?
Well, one comment I would like to make is 53% of readers use magazine to plan outdoor activities. That's pretty significant, and very encouraging. I'm also interested in, you said your industry trend, you studied industry trends, regarding print media is not a dying media.
Right.
Where did you draw that information from?
There are groups, magazine advocates that analyze data from third-party suppliers. Most of that is through voluntary data that consumer magazines put out there, and they put together reports every year. And so this was a conclusion made on one of the most recent reports.
I'd say it's a little tribute actually to the conservation itself. And we have a lot of folks that probably read this magazine and don't read hardly any other ones. So a tribute to staff and the design and the quality of it gets head and shoulders above most of the industry magazines. Thank you.
Commissioner Blair?
I think it's great and it's exciting you're doing it. Are you doing similar work with Explorer?
We aren't. We went through a mini redesign a few years ago. I believe, we started Explorer in 2010. I believe in 2014 we added a couple extra pages to Explorer, added a few new sections. We haven't done an extensive reader survey with Explorer, is why we haven't really changed it. We've done some informal focus groups around the state in classrooms, but not at all to the scale that we've done with conservation.
And my only comment, I already gave this to Deputy Draper and I said to Joni that the calendar viewer is great, and I know you want to post it on refrigerators or people like it, but it still requires you to kind of get your calendar out and look at these dates. And I'm a big advocate for visuals and stuff, and I think you can take a month at a glance and with some highlighting, you have dates so you can see where there's duplicate dates, whether it's a youth hunter, quail season, or a duck season, or a youth opener, or Norsum. I love the at a glance being able to see the opportunities for planning purposes.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's something that we can keep in mind as we further refine the magazine.
Thank you. I mean, there's even wonder if there's a way to take that so I can just download it on my phone, you know, your Windows or your Microsoft or
Oh,
whatever.
totally. Yeah,
and
we
it
can
just
look at that.
populates for you.
That would be a great service to our readers.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bell?
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of hard work. Thank you.
It's one of those 90%ers. I've got to confess that I'm delighted to start sharing this new look with my daughters and grandchildren. It's a marvelous improvement. Thank you. Next, I think we're going to hear from Jacob Carriaga, Dean Harry, Bruce Stratchuk, and maybe an introduction from you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Dr. Collin, Ms. Maples. We have been, over the last couple of weeks, trying to do our very best to keep the Commission updated and apprised of all of the flood-related activities that have been going on across the southern half of the state. We've got some folks here that have been up to their elbows in it since the very beginning. Dean Harry serves as our one of our emergency incident command team leads. He and Jason Jensen had long duty the first couple of weeks trying to keep track of all the activities and getting all the reports back to administration and the commission. Of course, Jacob works very closely with all of the divisions and his staff to try to identify and assess all the damage that has taken place to the infrastructure that the department has due to flooding. And then Charles at forefront trying to keep track of how the folks at our hatcheries were faring. Unfortunately, not always quite so well. So these folks are going to give you a pretty detailed presentation here this morning to give you a sense of the scope and magnitude of the things that we're trying to get our arms wrapped around. So I think we start with Dee.
Welcome, Dee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Polly, Ms. Maples. As Jennifer just said, if you're up to her elbows, and my elbows are pretty close to the ground, so floating. Seems like not long ago, we were at this very same auditorium discussing the aftermath of the 2015 May and June floods, and here we are again. So this morning, we're going to take a look, give you some timelines of this 2017 flood event. We're going to cover some storm background information, preparation, emergency response, the hatcheries, cleanup, damage assessments, and the next steps. First and foremost, I want to point out this is a total team effort, dedicated professionals across all divisions of this department. It was quite an undertaking, as you can see in some of the upcoming slides. And we think about the flood event that took place 3 weeks ago, we automatically go to the weekend. But all the results from the weekend didn't just occur overnight. It started earlier on. It actually started, the front moved in on Wednesday, April 26th. Photo on the left-hand side is Mother Nature releasing her fury on the Ozark Regional Office. That's one of the last days of April. It looks like it went through a storm. Look at the trees in the background. The trees have been stripped clean of their leaves from all the thunderstorms that came in, all the hail that's dropped. The photograph on the right is the radio tower that's brought down with the force winds that came in with it. National Weather Service put a prediction out that didn't bode well for the southern part of the state. If you look at those numbers that they predicted, they were looking up to upwards of 12.5 inches of rain across south central Missouri. Again, moving through this before, our agency prepared for this. We've gone through several events in the last several years involving floods. So we looked at this and we took this prediction seriously and got our staff ready for what was about to come. And again, what happened in the Ozark Regional Office there was just a precursor of what the weekend was going to bring for all of us. The department immediately stood up and activated our emergency incident command. Our policies on the left-hand side, there is our emergency response recovery management plan, which is our playbook that we operate by. We immediately sent out emails to our staff. The picture on the right-hand side is our emergency contact list that shows all our key players up here at the central office, as well as our regional coordinators, regional disaster coordinators. We have 2 per region across the state, make sure we have proper coverage. We make sure we sent out information. We sent out all the SEMA and FEMA tracking sheets with the staff to make sure they had them to keep track of their hours, their equipment, their expenses, anything related to the recovery process, and later on for reimbursements with SEMA and FEMA. One of the key players on that list is Mary Stieperman with Human Resources, and she is a godsend to all of us because she receives all that information, sent it from the field, puts on nice forms that's hard and difficult for most people to understand, it comes from SEMA and FEMA, and she gives us a product that we can then turn in for reimbursement. She's been wonderful to work with. Prior to the weekend, there was a lot of planning and staging that took place. The photograph just shows protection division in coordination, direct coordination in contact with the Department of Highway Patrol, Missouri Highway Patrol, staged a lot of our assets, flood recovery assets, swiftwater rescue assets. And the chart on the left-hand side shows a work plan and basically our equipment list for the Southwest region. So they have a plan going in, make sure they had adequate staff prepared for properly trained swiftwater rescue. Also knew where our assets were staged, and also made sure we had personnel staged out over a couple of days so the fatigue factor wasn't going to come into effect. We had to worry about safety of our folks out in the field as they got tired and got weary. Other preparations that took place during this time frame, we had several requests from SEMA for dump trucks to use to haul sand around the Piedmont area for sandbagging operations in southeast Missouri. Staff stepped up and helped out with that. Fisheries took the initiative to bring in additional pumps for several of our hatcheries, just in case the flood water to the pier, they were ready for it, prepared for it. Other staff from some of those areas prone to flooding that knew this was coming in their direction, made preparations to remove some of the equipment, our critical assets and equipment that we could to higher ground so they were out of the way of the storm. I'll let this speak for itself. This is Mother Nature coming in with fury. I'll let you do it one more time. You can prepare for a lot of events, a lot of natural disasters. This one's hard to prepare for, but we were ready for it. Unfortunately, the National Weather Service prediction came to fruition. Over that 3-day course, we did experience rains in the amounts of torrential rainfalls in the amount of up to 12 inches, 8 to 12 inches across most of southern Missouri, West Plains. I'm talking to Gary Cravens. He said the rains down there, they received 9.5 inches of rain over a 6-hour period of time. He also said it looked like the town of West Plains, which became basically an island on the 29th of April. It looked like a tornado had run through the town, all the damage that occurred there. On the same date, April 29th, on Saturday, Governor Crichton declared a state of emergency due to the flash flooding. Next couple pictures are going to show you some of the magnitude of the storm that actually came in. This is again from long sustained rains over 3 or 4 days. Ground that was saturated, rivers, streams, impoundments, and lakes that no longer they're at their full capacity. This is some of what we saw. This is Highway CC, just west of West Plains over the North Fork River. This is the current river, Highway 19, just outside Emmons. Interstate 40 near Hazel Green access. Believe it or not, that highway is back up and operational the next day. And of course, this is a railroad bridge at Jerome. Just the power of the water and the rain from over the weekend and accumulation. Early on the 29th, on that Saturday, our agents were called into action along with Highway Patrol. The center photograph shows Highway Patrol and a conservation agent, both certified swiftwater rescue. Actually, our training is conducted together. Some of our agents serve as swiftwater rescue instructors along with Highway Patrol. They served very, very incredibly well throughout this entire evolution. At the same time, we had 3 towers go down over in the southeast region. IT jumped on board along with other staff and other divisions to make sure we have power for our communications, because everybody knows radio communications is vitally important for your staff out there conducting swiftwater rescues and make sure we get the word out. I'm going to go back. One thing I neglected here, over the course of the 2 days, the combination of Highway Patrol and agents conducted nearly 300 swiftwater rescues. They responded to hundreds and hundreds of calls for public assistance. Many of them due to the roadways we looked at a second ago. We had to find ways to get around and death and overcome it. The agents and our folks out there did it very well. In addition, our agents spent time working a SEMA request to put security on a levee down in New Madrid County to make sure we have 24/7 security on that levee for up to 10 days. Agent staff also helped out with flood evacuation operations. Hundreds and hundreds of folks down there were evacuated from their homes. A lot of agents actually did patrols to bring food, water, and supplies back out to those that weren't ready to leave their homes but were still isolated due to flood waters. Our OD division did an excellent job for this department in getting the word out and capturing a lot of the memorable events of this flood evolution. The one on the left is what Director Paul already commented about. The agent, Daniel Shores, actually having a blanket handed to him by a woman he was rescuing. He listened to Daniel talk about it. He didn't know what it was. He thought it was just some very important property that the woman was wanting to save, not realizing the 1-week-old child in the blanket. So, and those stories were over and over and over again repeated across the southern part of the state. On the right-hand side, again, great cooperation between Highway Patrol and Reserve Department Conservation Swiftwater Rescue teams. We had 67 agents that participated in the flood events in one way, shape, or form. And on May the 1st, Governor Greitens made a special visit down to the southwest region to thank and praise those agents and staff that were involved in swiftwater rescue operations. The majority of those occurring in southwest Missouri were performed by conservation agents. And you can see on the right-hand side, State Representative Bill Reibold actually went out of his way to do an audio recording on the radio, in addition to a news fleet that went out praising the conservation agents and Highway Patrol for all the rescues in the region. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Director Polly, Ms. Maples. As you all are well aware, our hatcheries are somewhat prone to flooding because of their locations that take advantage of the cold water resources that we need to produce trout for the citizens. Our managers have actually become pretty good amateur meteorologists, as Dean was indicating. Some of our preliminary, plans ahead of time they were well aware of what was coming, and we were able to plan. What you see here is actually the Millpool Raceways at Montauk. We were brought in 4 pumps. As Dean mentioned, we were also able to bring in some auxiliary lighting, because these things, they're out there fighting them all hours of the day and night, and we have to be out there. So we're also able to get a lot of staff lined up from a lot of divisions to help us through this entire process. We'll just start off with Bennett Springs. You may recall in 2015, the Christmas flood of 2015, it was heavily impacted. As you can see here, we did have some high water, but flooding was somewhat minor. We had some minor flooding in the raceways, but primarily it was, as you can see here, kind of brown water, a lot of debris in the water itself. So staff have had to go through and clean out a lot of the raceways and just make sure they're clean and the fish are in good shape there. This is the stream in Merrimack. Just to be clear, it's not supposed to look like this. This is West Lee's been manager down there for a long time, and this is obviously the highest he has ever seen. It should be, if you've been there before, it's a nice, clear, cool, quiet area. This is pretty vibrant. One good thing is you see flows like that, the Merrimack River actually backed up into the park and then kind of mitigated, I guess, some of the damage that could have been done by those flows. In 2015, we weren't as fortunate, and we actually had a lot of erosion to the Spring Pool Dam. This time we did not see. This is also Merrimack. The picture on the left, and the building in the foreground is the James Foundation building. Our building kind of sits just back behind there, so we did have water in the building, 15 inches of water or so inside the building. The picture on the right is actually from the 2015 floods, and I just show you this because it shows the covers that we can put over top for the raceways at Merrimack to keep the fish where they're supposed to be. The problem with this time, those covers were actually a foot underneath the water. So we could have taken the same picture, but you couldn't have seen anything. Moving on to Montauk, and this is the hatchery that was hardest hit. This is the basement underneath the office where we do our egg hatch our eggs and then start our fingerlings and fry in there. As you can see, the water was about waist deep in there. As the water did finally recede, staff were able to go in and kind of corral some of the fish that remained inside the building, and we were able to put those back inside their tanks. This is the mill pools, kind of where we showed those pumps. This picture would be taken about where those pumps are sitting, looking up. If you're familiar with the area, the building up atop the levee is the old mill that sits down there. So there should be 12 individual raceways in this picture, but unfortunately, we weren't able to keep it that way. Water was coming in so fast, there was actually water running down the levees. At one point, we were really concerned the river would actually top the levee and come into the pools. This is actually the intake for the mill pools. This is kind of upstream a little bit there. That is the current river. As part of the, planning ahead, the T-posts you see with the yellow signs on them were put there ahead of time, so the guys, we know we have to be there in order to keep the stream clean, to keep water flowing into the mill pools. So they know they have to be there, and that's just to help them to understand where the edge of the structure is there so they don't step off. I mentioned lighting. This is where we put the lighting because they have to be out there in the middle of the night trying to scrub those screens to make sure we can keep water flowing to the raceways. We wanted to add this picture. I didn't really know what to call it. Dedication, I guess. We're battling a historic flood, and yet we had 3 anglers out there, and I'm assuming they were catching fish. I was down there several different times the following week, and people were always catching fish. So. But that's why the guys do what they do when they're out there all night, try to keep these fish alive for them. Part of the recovery, the picture on the left is the mill pools. We actually put a bobcat down inside there to try to remove as much of the sand and debris as we can from these. We'll just move the fish that are in there into other raceways. And currently, the guys are going through the process of evaluating inventory and see what we have. The picture on the right is actually below the what we call the lake pools. That's a catch and release area. They're actually seining up. We caught some brood fish out of there. A lot of the smaller fish we were able to net up out of there and return those. Interesting story, we did have some anglers who, the guys were working and a guy comes running up over the bank with a broodfish in his net and he goes, "Where does it go?" And they told him which pool to put it in, and they caught somewhere between 150 and 200 broodfish and put them back into where they're supposed to be. Roaring River, this one's a little interesting. Primarily Roaring River, we get a lot of park damage, a lot of debris, as you can see piled up there. A lot of gravel at this park that moves through the system. We were there yesterday, meeting with DNR on a couple different topics. Our D&D staff have been there for quite some time working to remove gravel. The debris, is pretty well cleaned up. There's still work to do. Actually, it's in good enough shape down there. They're preparing, as well as Merrimack, they're both preparing to have kids fishing days tomorrow. Picture on the right, this was a little concerning for us. One of those is our liquid oxygen line, and the other one is our electric line. If something would have broken the liquid oxygen line, we would have lost the whole hatchery primarily because of improvements the commission has allowed us to do in years past. We have liquid oxygen that helps during these times, and we've been having a different discussion. And I think Jacob brought it up, if we had to break the electric line and the oxygen line, we could have been having an entirely different discussion as well. Shepherd's a little unique. As you know, we had a record release in 2015-16 of like 73,000. There was talk early on of anywhere from 70 to 150,000 CFS release from Table Rock Dam. Fortunately, we did not get that high. I think the high was 62,500. We were there yesterday, walking the banks. There is some damage. D&D staff were there on site, cleaning up, getting rid of people still fishing. The flow now is down to about 15,000 CFS, so it is quite high. We actually joked yesterday, you see the 2011 high water mark sign there. We talked about as frequently as we're getting these now, we just ought to put up the IRAs for it. Bottom line is, we have fish. There have been some social media reports, that we lost everything at Montauk. That is not the case. We have fish all over. That was Leslie, acting manager. As I indicated at Merrimack, we have 4 raceways that we can cover. This is actually pool 5. The way it's constructed, the way it lays there, we are not able to cover that one. So it was under 1.5 foot of water. And so there was some concern as to what was left. What you see there is after the water is receded, and we still have a substantial amount of fish there. The hatchery is managed as a system between all 5 parks. It's common, every year we move fish from one location to the other to make sure we have the right fish at the right facilities to provide an angling opportunity. As we were dealing with that, as you're well aware, as Dean showed with the radar and the forecasting, the entire Ozark region was hit. As water started to recede, staff were able to get out from all the divisions and start the task of cleanup. Some of the facilities, it was just a matter of cleanup. We were able to remove some silt and then get it back where the public can utilize the systems again. When I saw this picture, I thought it's not every day you think you're going to come up and shell out an outhouse when you come to work, but unfortunately, as these things happen, it's just part of what we have to do to get it available for the citizens. USIC, on our whirlwind tour yesterday, we had the opportunity to go by there as well. It's obviously not perfect at this point. There's some unique piles of gravel around yet, and as you can see there, they were working on the trails. The east parking lot was totally full of people. They were out enjoying the river, and it was good to see that. As we continue through this process, there are some more involved requirements, and I'm going to hand it off to Jake now to discuss those.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, Director Paul. As has been indicated previously, significant weather event created many challenges for the department related to infrastructure and access to nature. As soon as the floodwaters began to recede, staff from all across the agency were out at the different areas, assessing what the damages were. And I'm going to share with you some highlights to give you a sense of the types of damage that were incurred, as well as the magnitude. What's very typical in a lot of areas is deposition of material. Here you see at Lower Flat Creek access, a lot of aggregate material from parking lots and roads relocated. Underneath that aggregate is a little bridge access, a ramp. You can see the curve on the left-hand side of the picture. So, all things considered, this is a relatively good situation. Since there's not significant damage, you just need to move the material back in place so you can restore access. With high flow events, we typically see significant scouring. That's where the material is moved away, particularly around hard infrastructure like this privy. This is an emergency overflow from impoundment at Rincon Trailway. And this is low water crossing on the roads at Stubblefield access. Very typical of what we saw across many areas in the Ozarks. And this is the more extreme example of scouring. That is a concrete roadway. That is not a sidewalk, that is a roadway, just to give you a sense of scale. Also, you know, in the background, look at the trees and what happened there. Just to give you a sense of the power of the water that was moving through the system. At Eminence City Park, at the end of the cap, or at the end of the boat ramp, as you can see, it was actually folded over. So we're kind of stepping up here in the significant damage. Dogs Bluff access, similar situation where the concrete ramp that had been in place for many years was upended. And the more extreme situation at Patrick Bridge Conservation Area, you can see the actual ramp has been sheared off and relocated. Significant damage there. And if you look again in the background, it looks almost as if a tornado has gone through there, but it was water that did it. With severe inundation in many areas, if you look at Columbia Bottom, this is the Confluence Observation Platform. You're familiar with it. A lot of water moving through the system there. Those are the privies, right, leading to the Confluence Platform, just to give you a sense of how much water is in the area. And this, during the flood event, this is the water coming over the levee along the road. And this is what it looked like after the flood waters receded. This is, we've seen this in similar or previous flood events at Columbia Bottom. This is a different perspective on this road and trail system at Columbia Bottom. And these series of pictures just give you a sense of scale. The good news at Columbia Bottom is that the repairs that were made after the last flood event at the boat ramp in the parking area, they held. So we're in good shape there. It's just a matter of restoring access to that infrastructure. So as we have endured these events, we have adapted and we've learned and we've made improvements to the infrastructure to make it more resilient. We also had damage to buildings throughout the area. This is an example here in the Osho office where a tree fell on the roof, and we were very fortunate. It was only a 2-foot hole in the roof. A few more feet the other way, it could have been a much different story. Bruce mentioned previously at Merrimack Spring, we had water in some buildings. As soon as the waters receded, staff were in there removing the water-sogged material so that we would make the repairs easier and reduce the amount of mold. And then at the Ozark Regional Office, the event that kicked off the storms, the radio tower you see here collapsed in that storm, and about 30 feet of the upper end of the tower actually penetrated the roof of the regional office. The next day, we had staff on site extricating the tower from the roof. You can see here in this photograph, at the very bottom in the middle of that picture, you can see electrical conduit and heating and air conditioning lines. So it could have been a lot worse, but we're very fortunate that the structure didn't hold up. We have a contract in place now with the consulting firm to come in, do the damage assessment, design the repairs, and then direct design development and carpenter crews to make the repairs as quickly as possible. Privies did not fare well in this flood event. You can see it pay down access. Once the scouring starts around the hard infrastructure, it undermines the privy, and it appears to be all there. We just need to get it back together. This privy did not fare as well. When I showed this to my children, they thought it was the privy in Jurassic Park. And this privy did not fare well at all. So a lot of work will be needed to restore the amenities where they're necessary. Jerome Access, many of you are familiar with the events, flooding events in the past, on how they caused some damage. This was what staff saw when they first arrived on site at Jerome. Again, the good news is the privy is standing. They were very surprised to see that. But the repairs that we made previously and what we've learned from previous events were applied, and you can see here the shot rock, the large boulders that were compacted in place around the privy, held it in place during the flood event. The parking lot's base, again, made of shot rock, compacted in place, held. The surface material has been stripped away, but the parking lot is still there, as well as the boat ramp held. So very remarkable considering this was the third record event at this location in 4 years. Now, if you get a different perspective at Jerome, you'll see that we have another challenge that presents us. And this isn't the only location where we have a situation where new channels, new high flow channels have been eroded. So while the access is in relatively good shape, what we now have to overcome is how do we provide citizens access to the access. So the next steps is the engineers will be working very closely with field staff to complete their damage assessments of the more severe damage like I just shared with you. The agency will prioritize those repairs. Many of the more routine repairs like the repairing the road aggregate has already been underway. We'll then develop communication plans for the prioritized repairs so that we can be working with communities to help them understand our approach to those repairs and know what our timelines are. We'll complete those repairs. Of course, administration is actively involved in the Cabinet's Coordination Committee for Recovery throughout this process, and we anticipate a federal disaster declaration in the near term, which will then help us with the reimbursements for the repairs as we proceed. That concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very informative. Each of you, thank you very much. Comments or questions, Commissioner Goodell?
Well, I think this depicts some of the things that we talked about in our budget, and how you can plan for these sorts of things. In spite of everything you do, you're going to have something like this. And I was just visiting with the director before we started back, Mr. Chairman, that as we go forward, as we look at all of this, and we say, well, we have a lot of damage out there, we need to be mindful of the people that lost their houses. I mean, you take it down like Van Buren, completely destroyed, basically. People on fixed income that have lived in those houses for 50, 75 years. They're on fixed income, Social Security. They can't rebuild because they can't make a mortgage payment. If they were able to rebuild, they couldn't pay the flood insurance premiums because of the classification now. So I hope that we're mindful as we go through this and that we reach out to do what we can. Interestingly, the governor has called this special session for Monday to deal with jobs. But when you look at areas such as Van Buren, that is totally dependent, Mr. Chairman, on tourism, and you have a place like my brother's, you've all been to the landing. It's totally out of business right now. Hiring 125 people. And the governor wants to call a special session, but as of Tuesday, had not declared this a disaster area. So the federal government is not able to come forward with FEMA. I had a congressman tell me, well, if he does, then FEMA can only give him 32,000. I told him he'd been in Washington too long. $32,000 to some of those people is more than a lifetime of savings. So as we go forward, just like talking about Van Buren and looking at the boat ramp and what we could do to try to help with access to the river, we need to be mindful of what we can do, because as of Tuesday, they had not even been able to pick the garbage up in the streets. So now it's become a health issue. And that's just one place. You go to Thomasville, you go to Doniphan, you go to all these places talking about the boat ramp and inlets. And then we have people that have lost their cabins. You were talking about one of our good friends in conservation from Cape Girardeau. Up and down that river, you know, people have lived in houses that have been completely destroyed. I mean, they come back and their homes go. So as we move forward and as we try to restore what we're responsible to restore, we need to try to reach out every way that we can to help these people. Just do a little bit extra. I don't think that's asking too much. I know Monday there's a meeting with the National Park Service to try to see what maybe we can jointly do with them. And then another meeting, I think, following that Brian's going to be in and meeting with people in Carter County, the commissioners and the city fathers. So we go around to these communities, let's try to reach out and help them. If it means getting off of our roadway to try to push the street out to where they can access their property, I think that we ought to try to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. There's a lot of work to be done and a lot of dollars to be spent. Thank you for allowing me to.
Absolutely. Commissioner Blair?
I guess, I want to go back to Dean and just, you stepped down so quickly, and I think it was just so, there was so much there to take in. I think you stepped down before we had a chance to just applaud your team and the enforcement folks, as well as you said it was a multi-agency effort to just commend that effort and say thank you and recognize it properly. You were so quick to step down. I wanted to not miss that opportunity. And thank everybody. And then Jacob, everybody gets caught up in the rescue and the recovery, trying to get back to business as usual. But I have served on an organization called Great Rivers Habitat Alliance for 15 years, currently the chairman of, for full disclosure. But these events happen more and more. I'm not going to debate what the cause is or why weather patterns are changing, or if there's watershed or river constriction or levee. But it's happening and it's going to happen again. And some of the things you have learned we can apply, but we're going to have to make some decisions about rebuilding or not, or putting back in harm's way or not. And I just, at least from this commissioner, while I will be around a lot longer, I hope that we have the fortitude and wisdom to say we're not going to keep repeating the same mistake over and over again. If we can't do it to where it won't get destroyed, let's not keep wasting money. Let's step back and consider what our alternatives are.
To all of you that have stepped up to the microphone, I can do attitude our staff displays is amazing. And I know we're gonna have some difficult choices facing us in the future here because of the magnitude of what occurred. And I think, we need to involve the people in the communities in some of these decisions that we make, budgetarily as well as manpower wise. So I would encourage engaging the local leaders as much as possible, and then whatever political leaders might be able to help in this situation. This isn't something we can do by ourselves. So appreciate the work that everybody's done.
You're welcome. Thanks for the snapshot of what we understand thus far about what we face. We live at the end of the road and on the riverbank. We operate in the floodplain. These are places where risks are inherent in what we do. And yes, it is a question of balancing the resources that we have with the access we wish to provide. Thank you so much for this. It's obvious that we're learning as we go along. Some of the changes that were made as a result of things that we've had that didn't work very well in the past have been improved, and that's a marvelous accomplishment. And I'm so proud of each of you as we address this and try to move forward. It's not going to be easy, but certainly this commission is committed to do everything in our power to support your efforts. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question of Jacob? Because we had, I think in the expenditure plan for this year, we had a replacement of towers. Was the tower at West Plains one of the ones?
No. That tower was about 15 years old. It was just a design event. It was a significant straight line wind that happens once in a while. The unfortunate thing is that it just fell in the direction of the building.
We have any kind of insurance?
Yes, sir. We are actively working with the insurance adjuster to evaluate the claim and work through that process.
Director, do you have something to add?
Mr. Chairman, I think I appreciate the support of the commission as we are looking at all of the areas that have been impacted and establishing criteria by which we'll be making recommendations on what's repaired, what's not, and how do we change design of certain areas. And we appreciate that the communities need to be involved in those decisions. Ultimately, we know there's going to be winners and losers. Some of these areas we may choose not to replace in the same way. And so we know the communication strategy of how we arrive upon those ultimate decisions are going to be critical, because in some cases the public may lose opportunities that they've had in the past, and I think we just need to all make sure we're communicating throughout that process. So I appreciate your input on communication early and often.
One last comment. I think often we fail to realize the danger that our agents and the highway patrol face when they go out on these rescue missions, and it's after dark and it's raining and there's winds and everything. And they're to be commended on their professionalism and their abilities, and I think that goes back to the training classes that we conduct and what they go through. Because these people are well trained, they know what they're doing, and we appreciate everything that they've done.
One last question, at least I'll shut up. But Bruce, can you give us any guess as to what impact percentage-wise this may have had on hatchery production in the trout parks?
We really don't know at this point. We're hoping to finish up some evaluation and inventory this week, and then we'll just have to see how that looks and what that may look like going forward. We'll be sure to share that with you as soon as we have it.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the next. Andrew, I think you're up next. Let's not say we're moving from one catastrophe to the next.
Chair, members of the commission, Director Pauly, Ms. Maples. I have an action item. It's a recommendation of the fiscal year 2018 internal expenditure plan approval of the Conservation Commission Fund fiscal year 2018 internal expenditure plan with planned spending of $202,355,384.
We have a motion to that effect.
You have a motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, let's have some discussion. Floor is open.
Well, Andrew, we put you through your paces here in a really short period of time and asked a lot of you as well as a lot of what we've asked from everyone. This is probably the best prepared budget we've had presented to us. So I just want to applaud everyone's participation, patience, in working through this with us because we have a lot of questions. And I think you've answered a great deal of them, and there'll probably be more as we go forward with these latest reports that we've had to deal with. But appreciate the time and energy and effort put in by everyone.
Commissioner Goodell?
As a seconder of the motion, I do this for the sake of being able to move this department forward. I think everyone should realize that the amount of discussion, not just that you people had in the preparation, but the questions that came forth from the commission and telephone calls, and then this public meeting yesterday. There are some areas that need improvement that we talked about.
Absolutely.
And there are areas that will probably be altered during the coming year. We hope that revenue meets the target that we have. And we just move forward to see what happens. But I think that we all need to realize that there's a good possibility, depending on what happens, that we have to come back to this table to make some difficult decisions. But at least this allows us to be able to let the department move forward.
Commissioner Blair?
Yeah, I specifically just kind of held back because I'm not gonna be around for, the implementation of that spending, and I wanted the other commissioners to, be on board. But I echo what was said about the amount of work, by staff and the job that you've done, Andrew. But, I also want to commend the commission because I've been here, going toward the end of 6 years now, and I will tell you that this commission is more engaged and more involved, and sometimes that creates friction. Without friction comes a little energy, and you get traction, and you get engagement, and you get that, we're moving in a better direction, and we're getting better results. So all the way around, I'm just proud to be part of the whole process. So thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. I have the next.
That was easy.
Andrew might not say
It's sort of like the reflexive memory of mothers that have just experienced childbirth. You kind of forget it for a while, maybe, sort of.
I have the next item on the agenda as well. It's the financial summary. Just wanted to note, we heard some comments at the last commission meeting on the report, and I tried to make adjustments accordingly. So I hope that those changes, especially maybe page 2, gives you a better understanding or a better communication of what's involved on that page.
Do you have any highlights, remarks, or anything specific you'd like to add about this financial statement?
Yes, I can go through the disbursements and expenditures.
Yes.
if you'd like. Please. I'll start on page 4 with the receipts. Conservation sales tax receipts are 0.8% higher than last year at this time and consistent to our expected budget to be in April. The perceived smaller percentage growth you will see is really due to timing. When we compare 2016 to 2017, 2016 had one more day to the end of the month, one more work day than 2017. So that makes it look like it's a smaller growth. When we look into the next few days in May, we see that it starts to sink back up again when we start to get the growth that we expect to see. So that's why the 0.8% looks a little lower than normal. And according to the most recent sales tax report from Office of Administration in April, sales and use taxes increased 1.9% from the previous year. So we're still on track for 7. Permit
Bill,
I have a question. On that page 4 where you, in your commentary, because as I look at this, the change from 17 to 16 is roughly $3.5 million increase. You see that what I'm talking?
Page 4.
Yes.
Okay, you say this decrease represents a lag in revenue.
In the first line, just the conservation sales tax.
Okay, so that's all you're talking about is that sales tax.
Correct, and I'll go through the rest of them.
Thank you.
And it's not necessarily a decrease, it's just a lower growth rate than we expected, and it's really a timing issue.
Right.
Because we just get in the sales tax revenue on work days. Permit receipts are 2% lower than last year and 4.2% higher than projected so far this year, or so far this fiscal year. The rate of permit sales actually slowed, or the number of permit sales actually slowed in April, mainly due to the last 2 weekends in April being quite wet.
so we've heard.
Federal reimbursements are 7.4% higher than last year and 1.8% above the level we expected at this point. Sales and rentals line is 1.7% higher than last year and 2.2% higher than expected. The other line is 83.3% higher than last year and 39.6% higher than expected, mainly due to large donations and SEMA reimbursements from prior years. Total receipts for April 2017 are 2.3% higher than last year at this time and 1.2% higher than expected at this point in the fiscal year. Next, I'll turn our attention to the disbursement summary on page 6. Disbursements are categorized into 4 major areas: personal service, expense, equipment, and capitals. Total personal service disbursements, the first full line on page 6, show a 2.4% increase from the previous year and 0.7% less than expected for April 2017. The next bold line, entitled Total Expense, shows fiscal year to date disbursements are 2.1% higher than last year and 1.2% lower than anticipated at this time. Equipment disbursements are shown on the third bold line and are 10.8% lower than this time last year and 19.7% higher than expected so far this fiscal year. And the main reason is the department decided to purchase equipment more evenly over 17 than they did in 16. 16, a lot of the equipment was purchased late in the year. Total capital disbursements represented as the second to the last bold line are 56.5% higher than last year and 6.4% higher than budgeted at this time in the fiscal year. Land acquisitions occurring earlier in the fiscal year have caused most of this variance. In FY16, more land acquisitions again occurred in the last quarter of the fiscal year. Total disbursements for FY17 through April are 6.2% higher than the last time this year and consistent 0.8% higher than expectations. This concludes my report on the financial.
Questions or comments, Commissioner Blair?
predecessors with this chart. You know, it's very clear.
Mr. Baker? Mr. Goodell? Thank you.
Board of Commissioners, I have the next 4 agenda items, or action items. The first one would be a recommendation for approval to purchase approximately 64 acres in Callaway County as an addition to Whetstone Creek Conservation.
Could I have a motion to this effect?
Would the chair entertain, a motion for the first 3 items are all relatively small in size. We've spent hours going over these.
If I could get a second to that, certainly would.
You can have a second.
All right. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor of approval of these first 3 items as recommended, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. The first 3 are done, sir.
Good. Moving on to the 4th. So recommendation for approval to purchase approximately 558 acres in Bates County as an addition to civil sport conservation.
Do I have a motion to approve this action? Do I have a second? Any discussion about it? We have looked at this carefully, and we look at it as an excellent investment, so if there is no discussion, I would say those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Morning, Sue.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, Director Polly, Ms. Maples. The Director has approval over new hires, salaries, and terminations, but today we bring to you 3 recommendations for reclassification. The first one is from Design and Development Division, and it is for an infrastructure asset program analyst position. The second one is a human resources technician, a training technician position, and then the third recommendation that we bring to you today is from Wildlife Division for a feral hog elimination team leader position.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of that recommendation.
Of all 3.
Yes, sir.
Do I have a second to that effect?
Second.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome. I also have 2 other items on the agenda. The first is the quarterly report for personnel changes. The second one is an update on the Conservation Employee Benefit Plan financials for first quarter compared with first quarter of last year. And you will note that our total ordinary income is down by about a little under 6% this year. And most of that is attributable to an increase in claims spend on medical and on prescription costs, especially in the areas of mid-level and high dollar claims, which we cap at between $20,000 and $50,000 and above. We start calculating at that point. We have seen an increase in those claims, which is an overall factor as far as the increase that you see here in our income. I would entertain questions about this particular item.
Are you asking us for action at this point?
No action at this point, this is more information.
And so the increased costs are being planned to be covered how?
The increase in cost has already been accounted for through the trust fund balance. It is something that our consultant brought to us during discussions last year, and the board was very much aware of that when we recommended a 0% increase to the commission. We are anticipating it could go as high as $1.5 million from the trust fund this year, but at this point we're right on target with where we think we should be.
Are there any further questions?
I would ask a question we discussed why the expenses are up, and thank you for that discussion, but the revenue is down by roughly 300,000, 312,000, which is a result of.
There are a couple of things that factor into that. One of those in particular is we have a Medicare program that we use for our Medicare retirees, and it's a relationship between Express Scripts and CMS or Medicare. And when the Affordable Care Act came into play, since that time we've seen reductions in the amount of return that we see on those subsidy amounts from that particular program. It's decreased by quite significantly since that has taken place in the last 5 years. The other thing that I think is also driving that is we have had probably around 35 retirees in the last year that have switched coverage from us to another carrier.
big portion of that is a lot of those retirees are becoming Medicare eligible, and so they're going to Medicare supplement plans because they're more affordable. The other thing is we are seeing employed or retirees that are coming off of the VPRP or the Voluntary Payroll Reduction Program, and they are evaluating or reevaluating their needs for our health insurance as they see the cost is going up as their VPRP ends. So a combination of those things is really driving a lot of that increase that you see there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like you to explain a little bit more about your reinsurance fees, life insurance, HSA. You're getting ready to issue another contract for a multi-year contract.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's correct. This year we are going out to bid for medical, life insurance, and accidental death and dismemberment coverage. So yes, we are embarking on that, and in July is when the board will likely make a decision on that for the January 1 effective date. So yes, we are definitely looking at life insurance rates at that point in time. The reinsurance, we do evaluate that. The last time that we did it was 3 years ago, I believe. And then it came up for renewal last fall, and that is one that we actually send our consultant and our TPA out shopping for us for the best possible price. And it has continually gone up, but our experience has been relatively good. So the reinsurance business is one that is hard to ever see a decrease, but we are consistently seeing the reinsurance costs go up. You are correct.
Is that what makes up the largest portion of that 38%?
Yes, the reinsurance is a very expensive product. Yes. It does make up a large portion of that.
Any further questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Welcome back, Tom.
Thank you. Commissioners, in your binder on yellow tab 19, you will find the information that has to do with the Conservation Federation at their annual meeting, their committee meeting. They had one resolution that was brought to the department's attention and asked for a response in that. Mr. Chairman, unless you or other members of the commission have questions regarding a resolution, I would ask for a formal adoption of the proposed letter in your packet that we could send to the CFM as a response to the resolution.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Any discussion?
I would like to understand, is it your expectation that this is what they were looking for, and do you know how they'll react to this position and this?
Well, as you recall, Commissioner Blair, every year at the CFM annual convention, they have various committees that will ask the commission and the department to provide insight into a concept. This one had to do with investigating the potential for lead poisoning as a result of lost lead fishing tackle in Missouri Department of Conservation waterfowl refuge lakes, marshes, and tributaries. And in that, they recommended that they develop a white paper relating to investigations. This is a response on how we will address that recommendation. So yes, we're asking that this correspondence reflects to the Conservation Federation how we will respond to this report.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have the next item. As you all know, last Friday was the end of session at 6 o'clock. Went down right to the wire on a lot of different bills, but none of those bills had anything to do with us. I want to really thank staff for helping out this year, not only with bill reviews and fiscal notes, but just everything they do. You look at the presentations today of the staff putting their lives on the line, keeping hatcheries clean, or going out and saving people in horrible conditions. The efforts of staff last year with CWD mandatory sampling. We were blessed to have good weather that weekend. can't imagine what it would have been like, if it been raining or cold that day, but I guarantee our staff would have still been out there. And so, for me to go up to the Capitol and defend the department, is really an honor. It's not a pleasure sometimes, but it's definitely an honor, to go and tell the story of our staff. And they help tell those stories, just like yesterday, whether it was Larissa going up to St. Louis, or me over to Kansas City yesterday morning to get legislators afield, in this case, Peregrine Falcon banding. Larissa told me this morning that she had one urban St. Louis representative that was horrified at birds, but after having the opportunity of holding a baby Peregrine Falcon, she got a little different view on life, and I bet we have a new supporter of the department as well. A little bit about this year's session. We spent quite a bit of time yesterday in open session discussing the impacts of the changes in House Bill 6. We saw a reduction of $140,000 within administration's budget, as well as the changes in flexibility, with most of the divisions being reduced to 15% and private land services raised to 35%. I think we'll see further attempts by the General Assembly to reduce that flexibility. We've seen that in other agencies as well, and we'll just have to get in there and tell our story even better next year. On the CI side, House Bill 17, which is a reappropriation bill, actually contains 4 different CI reappropriations for the department. That has about $42 million, which is more than enough to carry us through this fiscal year. As you're well aware, House Bill 19, which would have been the new appropriation for capital improvements, was not approved by the General Assembly. This is not the first time that this has happened. I believe the last time was in 2007 or in 2008. Other legislation of interest, our priority was getting our littering fix done for our conservation agents. We were successful in getting that across the line in 2 different bills, in both Senate Bill 34 and in Senate Bill 128. If this is signed into law by Governor Brecknes, it will go into effect August 28th. Another important bill was Senate Bill 62, which deals with state employee retirement. The vesting requirement was changed from 10 years back to 5 years, where it had previously been prior to 2010. That will hopefully help attract and retain employees in all agencies within the department. Other legislation that did not move forward was unfortunately our poaching fines bill. We spent a lot of time working on that prior to the session. We had 4 different bills introduced, 3 in the House, 1 in the Senate. We had excellent hearings in both the House and the Senate, but unfortunately those bills did not advance out of committee. We'll keep on fighting that fight next year, hopefully get some more media press on the issue and the challenges. O&E and Protection have done a tremendous job over the past month, putting information out on poaching, and that, I think that's going to help our cause as well. Legislation related to feral hogs, we had 2 different bills introduced. One was language that we helped write that would strengthen the penalties for illegally releasing feral hogs. Another bill that we didn't really care much for would have made it legal to process feral hogs, which would have been counterproductive to our efforts to eradicate hogs from the landscape. As you all are aware, legislation was also introduced to expand the Conservation Commission. That bill did not advance to the Senate floor. It pretty much just died on the calendar. We also had legislation introduced to sunset the sales tax, several different bills related to that. There was a hearing in the Senate committee, but it did not advance out of the committee. Hearing on captive cervids on the Senate side, that bill was placed on the Senate calendar, but never advanced to the floor for any sort of formal debate. And several bills related to permit requirements, one that would provide non-resident landowners with 80 or more acres reduced price hunting and fishing permits. We testified for informational purposes on that bill, describing the fiscal impact that it would have to the agency. We also had a hearing on not allowing adults not to have a permit if they take a youth hunter hunting. We described the low cost of our permits compared to surrounding states, as well as the enforcement challenges that it would create for our conservation agents. Had 2 bills introduced related to hunter education requirements. It would exempt military and post-certified officers. Simply sitting down with the representatives, explaining the history of the hunter education program, why it's important, and then also making them aware that this summer we will be going online with a full hunter education class. Really help them understand the benefits. Neither one of those representatives requested a hearing, and at that point those bills died. Another bill that we were pushing forward with was dealing with animal trespass, primarily hound running dogs, to address problems that we have in North Missouri as well as in Central Missouri. We testified in favor of both of those bills. It would strengthen penalties for folks that allow their dogs to run freely on other people's property. Unfortunately, those bills didn't advance out of committee, but it did help us with a lot of our partners in North Missouri and Central Missouri to help them focus on the legislative process instead of Tom's regulation committee to make the proper changes in state law to address this issue. I really want to thank IT staff this year. We had a hearing on IT consolidation, which would have taken our IT shop and placed it in OA. Todd Larrabee here did an absolute A+ job testifying in the Senate committee on why this was a bad idea. Several bills related to land acquisition related to the department would take away the commission's authority to acquire land, as well as another bill that would basically end all land acquisition for state agencies unless approved by the General Assembly. We have a really good story to tell, and I've explained that to the commission in the past, that our conservation areas are working lands. We make the payment in lieu of tax, as well as our CART program, and then the new forest cropland program, the Missouri Managed Woods program that forestry is going to start up this year, really helped us fend off those bills. Also, we had legislation introduced related to right to hunt and fish. That bill did not advance to any committee, as well as the JCAR constitutional amendment that we all remember from a few years ago. That bill basically died in the speaker's desk. So it was definitely an exciting session. This was my 11th year. I kept track of every bill that we've seen over those 11 years, and we pretty much saw every bill this year. So we had a successful session. There's no doubt we'll have another challenging year next year. The work has already started. We've already started up with our legislative field trips. Larissa and I were discussing this morning. We probably need to have another legislative field trip up at Columbia Bottoms. Larissa and Chris Morrow had one there opening morning of turkey season. I got to work with Larissa on the dates that she schedules these field trips. Kind of avoid turkey season as much as possible. But obviously we need to have a field trip up there with legislators so that they can look at the scale of damage. We'll be doing that with other legislators with boat ramps. I've been talking with our appropriations chairman this morning. As you all know, we have a special session next week. I would like for the guys to go up and give the flood damage presentation to our appropriations committee and other members so that they start to understand the scale that we have over the next couple of years to repair these boat accesses in our areas. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments?
No questions.
No questions, just, I know it's tireless and thankless work. Keep it up.
Covered a lot. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Buy some new penny loafers for next year. You'll wear another couple of pairs out on the steps.
Yeah, I'm even.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would make one comment before we sit down by Mike, Mr.
Of
Chair.
course.
I have been notified on some occasions of next week, we're gonna take so-and-so out. Like, say, whether it's conflicts with turkey season or other things. I would encourage you to use your commissioners more and kind of push us a little bit more. And I think obviously that just means a little bit more advance notice. But, I think it would probably be helpful if Larissa's up there, if I was more available or had been more engaged. Maybe some of that's my fault, because I'm busy working, but I think some of it is advance notice of those things. So,
Yeah, we'll try to continue to include those in my weekly reports when we have the field trips. It's often a challenge on the logistical side to line up these field trips because you got to get 1 or 2 people to go, and then you put out the ask for 20 or 30 more. And it all falls together, it can definitely be a success. But, we'll get you on some goose roundups this year, Commissioner White. How about that?
I just want a duck band from the duck field.
Thank you. I think we have one item of unfinished business to address, and this is an action item that comes from our consent calendar that was deferred to this. The minutes of the open meeting at Montauk State Park on March 21st and 22nd. I think to start this process, we need a motion to approve in a second, and then we get into the discussion of the amendment. So could I have a motion to approve? So moved. Do I have a second? Okay. Now for the discussion. Do you have something prepared, Commissioner Goodell?
I think in the second motion of those minutes, there was a motion made by me and second by Commissioner Bradford, was dealing with our land conservation strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a lot of stuff that was added that differed just from the motion, and I would, for the sake of clarification, like to read what the motion was.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it just says for land conservation strategy, staff are directed to implement the recommendation of the land conservation strategy. And then picking up on the last sentence, any exceptions to the land conservation strategy are to meet the approval of the commission on a case-by-case basis. I think that was the motion, and if not, I stand to be corrected. Commissioner Bradford may want to speak to that.
As well, I was seeking clarification as secretary, and I thought that the motion wasn't exactly accurate in the wording of what Commissioner Goodell had actually said and what I seconded. There was a lot of discussion on this topic, but a commissioner is who makes the motion. And I was reacting to Commissioner Goodell's motion, which he's just restated.
So we've got it restated verbatim, and those changes have been noted. Rhonda, you've got it. Okay, anything else in the minutes?
No, I would call your attention to motion number 4,
Yes.
which was a motion by
Yes.
Commissioner Blair. And we approved the budget today, as I told you, Mr. Chairman, that this would not be an issue that we're gonna make anything out of. We approved the motion today to move the budget forward.
Right.
But it basically said that for land acquisition budget allocation, that the staff are directed to maintain the current land acquisition budget, which was $10 million, as we discussed in the budget meeting yesterday. So I think we made a motion to approve the budget today.
Right.
That was reduced to 7 million
Yes.
and not at the 10, which would be inconsistent with this motion. But at the same time, if we have to come back and deal with this at a later time, Mr. Chairman, we can do that.
Okay. At this point, there are no amounts specified in the minutes, and so I'd be my preference to leave it out at this point. Anything else in the minutes? Any other amendments to it?
We'll just leave that in the minutes, that's what the discussion was.
Okay.
And the only thing we're changing is that Commissioner Bradford and I discussed on the motion 2.
Which is line 78, 79.
Yes.
I think Wanda has it where we're deleting line 68, food. The first word in line 78.
Okay. Sure, we're in the purposes of discussion of the amendment at this point.
Little sidebar there.
Any further discussion?
Do we have a copy of what was the prior one? You just gotta look at them
it's right in front of us, it's on tab 1, and at the end here, in the.
I've got the changes one here.
Right.
Which is the one where, but apparently it can change.
That doesn't change, it's just a motion that came to.
Okay,
I think the discussion is that the director was bringing up that there was wording about the urban priorities, and it's calling to attention. I read this as staff directing implement recreation, land conservation strategy, fund prioritization, increase outdoor recreation opportunity in major metropolitan areas. I mean, is that not synonymous with urban? I mean, if the intent or the meaning is changed, is that where we're trying to change the intent or the meaning of the spirit of it, or are we just trying to get the wording right?
Are we speaking of motion 2?
Yes.
My reaction was that that's not, that whole motion was not what Commissioner Goodell said. And since motions are made by commissioners, I seconded what Commissioner Goodell said, and what he said was basically that first sentence and the last sentence, not all that in between. That was a discussion, but it wasn't part of the motion.
Well, the basic motion, I mean, we had a lot of discussion at the meeting, but the basic motion of it was that we continue the land conservation strategy, which encompasses a lot of things in this strategic deal, without going into all this other stuff, because, Mr. Chairman, that was not part of it. This other stuff was really not part of the motion that is added in these minutes.
right. So, the amendment, is to now read from motion 2. Could you read it back to us, Rhonda?
Staff are directed to implement the recommendations in the land conservation strategy period. Any exceptions to the land conservation strategy are to make the approval of the commission on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so that's our amended motion, and we have a second to that. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
I guess I have to take issue with that. I mean, I want to get it right, but we very clearly had a discussion about giving some direction, prioritizing, trying to have that urban connectivity and delivering conservation to the larger population areas and where we expect those population growth areas to be. Are we taking that directive out of this now?
No, because that's part of the land conservation strategy, that's the very thing that we've been talking about. In other words, we're saying we want to continue that land conservation strategy.
Director, are you satisfied that that's reflected in the land conservation strategy, that initiative or that direction?
I do think it's included in the land conservation strategy. It does not reflect, I think, what, so, we had, and I apologize, I know we had a couple of different versions of the minutes. And I think in part what happened was what we captured was what we thought was the discussion of the commission to focus on the metropolitan areas and include the priority geographies, but then we went ahead and included all of the conservation, the additional priorities in that conservation strategy, just to have them all together. But it certainly is in the land conservation strategy, and if that's the wish of the commission, then we certainly adopt it. We were just trying to make sure we also captured what we thought we understood from the retreat was that there was a clear agreement among the commission that the metropolitan or urban area focus should be considered a top priority.
Well, I think, Mr. Chairman, if I might,
sure.
the motion. It's not the intent of this motion to say that we don't do that. But it is the intent of the motion that that not be the only place that we look. In other words, if we have a large tract that comes up that we have and adds to what we've been trying to do, that we continue with that effort. That was the whole purpose of the motion.
The word
Not
priority comes to mind,
Not to have,
not exclusive, but a priority.
exactly, not to have it restricted, to say that we're only going to be able to look to that area.
Well, to capture the spirit of that, where can we add the words urban or something else to this as a priority?
I don't want to add it, Mr. Chairman, this was the motion I made. That is the amendment that I'm making to
Very
this.
good. Okay, well, we have an amendment.
But isn't that in the land?
Yes.
What we're
It
looking
is.
for is in the land conservation strategy.
Yes.
And so,
Let me ask a question of the author of the land conservation strategy. Jennifer?
It was a team effort. However, I would suggest that we could, just make it simple. To this point, while we've gotten the commission's court for the land conservation strategy, we've never brought it forward for final approval. And so what we could do in the land conservation strategy is just simply take those strategies that were identified, list them in a prioritized order, making certain what we heard, from both Commissioner Murphy and now Commissioner DeBelle and yesterday from Commissioner, that it's not exclusive, just that we consider things in this prioritized order. We get that in that document, bring it back to the commission for their final review.
Now, let's debate the priorities of the land conservation strategy at another time, the exact details of it. We've got the motion, we're just trying to put the minutes in the meeting here, so let's have this with your amendment. Let's vote on the amendment now, and those in favor of the amendment as offered signify by saying aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now let's approve the minutes. Those in favor of I've got a motion. I need a vote for those in favor of the minutes as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a kind of wrap up that,
Sure.
I think we're all on the same page. I think you're trying to get the wording of what the motion was and how it's worded correct, which is appropriate. And I think what the commission is directly or indirectly saying is, the commission would like to, doesn't want to be handcuffed by a policy. The commission wants to be able to decide when and how to move forward, if I understand the commissioner's intent behind getting the wording right. And I also appreciate staff's need to have some direction as to what the priorities are or what the areas that we're going to concentrate on, because you can't concentrate on everything at once. So I really do think, I think we're on the same page. I think we are.
Yes.
And that page, as far as I'm concerned, is for adjournment. So if I have a motion to that effect.
Exactly.
Any discussion? Those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.